Chapter 221, Fishing in Troubled Waters. Within seconds, Nathan drained every last drop of chakra from the two fallen shinobi. Just as he prepared to siphon their physical and spiritual energy, a volley of kunai and shuriken rained down from the rock ninjas lying in wait. The two corpses went cold, completely depleted. Nathan sighed to himself, what a waste. He casually tossed their bodies toward the enemy ranks. Startled, the rock ninjas leapt aside, creating a precious opening. Using the fallen bodies as cover, Nathan vanished in a flash, his refined variation of the flash body technique, and reappeared in the heart of the cluster. Konoha Goriki whirlwind. His right leg snapped up in a crushing back kick, sending every shinobi within reach sprawling across the rocky ground. Nathan's recent boost to his body attribute hadn't just expanded his chakra reserves and accelerated his recovery, it had also vastly enhanced his raw strength and speed. Even without formal training, he now outmatched most jonin in sheer physical power. Nathan unleashed his Konoha 5-style whirlwind, an attack every bit as devastating as any jonin's years of training. As several rock ninja collapsed around him, he quickly scanned the field and pinpointed the two shinobi whose chakra reserves were highest. With two effortless sidesteps, he closed the distance, seizing them both in swift, iron-clasped grips. Without hesitation, Nathan triggered his chakra absorption jutsu, draining their energy at a rate of 1,000 points per second. He pressed them forward as human shields, deflecting incoming strikes from the surrounding Iwagakure fighters. Though they struggled, their resistance was futile. Within a single breath, their chakra reserves were spent. Devoid of any energy to fuel a defense, and under fire from their comrades, they succumbed in mere seconds. Nathan released their lifeless bodies, a fleeting pang of regret crossing his mind, and prepared to repeat the process with the next targets. Before he could move on, a seasoned rock ninja, clearly one of Iwagakure's higher-ranking operatives, strode toward him from not far off. Nathan cast a glance back at the Iwagakure shinobi gathering behind him. He could feel his chakra swelling, nearly bursting through his skin. Without pausing to second-guess himself, he sprinted straight into the forest's shadowy depths. A seasoned Iwagakure ninja reached the clearing just as Nathan disappeared among the trees. He watched the young Uchiha's retreating form for a moment, then casually tossed a few kunai in his direction, more a symbolic gesture than a genuine pursuit. Nathan had been named specifically as a high-value target in this engagement. Everyone here knew the strength of the Uchiha. They dared not follow him blindly. If he outpaced them, so be it. If they caught up, a one-on-one confrontation would almost certainly end in their defeat, and there was always the risk of ambush lurking deeper in the forest's gloom. After weighing these dangers, the veteran ninja shrugged and turned away. His orders were clear: seize the high ground. Hunting down Uchiha Nathan was another team's responsibility. Let them risk their necks if they chose to. It wasn't his concern. Still, as he retraced his steps toward the hilltop, one question echoed in his mind. Why had Nathan charged straight through the front line so effortlessly? Siguang frowned as he surveyed the clearing. He questioned the nearby rock ninjas one by one and examined the 4 bodies strewn on the ground. Frustratingly, each victim had been killed so swiftly that none had time to explain how their chakra had been siphoned away. By the time Siguang arrived, all signs of the extraction had vanished. He prodded the other shinobi for answers, but they'd only seen the assailant vanish into the trees. There were no footprints, no telltale chakra residue, nothing to incriminate anyone. Despite the dead men's garbled last breaths, no one could say what had happened. Still, Siguang suspected the truth. If Nathan, the lone stranger rumored to be experimenting with chakra extraction, kept at it, his technique would be exposed eventually. Yet he shrugged off the danger. The rock ninjas, if they learned what Nathan was doing, would at worst keep a closer eye on him. And news of this strange chakra siphoning might reach Konoha, but so what? As long as Nathan didn't turn his newfound power against his own comrades, there was no real threat. No jonin or councilman in the land of Earth would raise more than an eyebrow. Extraction would continue. Nathan pressed on into the dense forest, his heart hammering even when his feet finally slowed. After a minute's cautious advance, he halted beneath a tangle of ancient pines and listened. Far off, he heard only the whisper of leaves in the breeze and the faint rustle of small woodland creatures. No shouts, no stamping boots, no chasing kunai whistling past. Satisfied that Si Guang and the others had given up the pursuit, for now, Nathan allowed himself a moment to breathe. He sank to one knee, masked by shadow and moss, and reached quietly for the chakra extractor at his belt. The forest may have been teeming with potential witnesses, but right here, in this still clearing, he could work in peace. He glanced back once more before slipping the device from its sheath. Even if his method risked eventual discovery, Nathan reminded himself, every breakthrough carried peril. He was ready. With a steady hand, he began his next extraction. Nathan crouched in the undergrowth, his Sharingan eyes burning red as he peered through the gaps in the forest canopy. Through the swaying leaves, he could just make out the squad of rock ninjas patrolling below. He inhaled slowly to steady his racing heart, then, without a moment's hesitation, began channeling chakra into his palm immortal technique. 20 minutes passed in silence as his chakra reserves bled away. When he finally stopped, his chakra meter read 20,000 points. He summoned his proficiency panel with a thought and scanned the results. His palm immortal technique remained at level 6, but its experience had climbed from 7,834 to 7,945, a gain of 111 points. At that rate, Nathan calculated it would take roughly 20 more uses and 300,000 chakra points to reach level 7. 300,000 points, he muttered. That's no small task. He closed the panel, tamped down his breathing, and melted back into the shadows. Judging by their formation and the forces arrayed, the skirmish ahead would drag on, giving him plenty of time to strike. Inch by inch, he slipped closer to the rear of the rock ninja column. When he judged himself within range, he burst from cover, chakra flaring around his palm as he lunged into the fray. Nathan slipped away from the battlefield once again, leaving a small commotion in his wake. Commander Si Guang stood over the 5 rock ninjas sprawled on the ground, his expression sour. Of course, Nathan had chosen to raid Si Guang's sector. Why waste time hunting the strong when the weak are so much easier? Since Si Guang wouldn't dare give chase, Nathan simply claimed his sheep and moved on. Nathan was supremely confident in his own abilities and knew that, had he struck elsewhere, any ninja pursuit would have ended with him slipping away unscathed. Why make things harder on himself? And even though every skirmish cost him a little chakra, he wasn't about to squander his resources in a drawn-out fight. Over the next hour and a half, he launched 3 more incursions into Si Guang's territory, capturing 14 additional rock ninjas. Altogether, counting his earlier haul, he amassed 65,000 chakra points, completing 1/5 of his plan. Beyond that, however, further raids would prove far more difficult. Nathan watched from the forest's edge as Si Guang battled on the open plain. The rock ninjas lying defeated around him meant there was no easy prey left. Si Guang was down to one final, desperate opponent. Nathan slipped forward through a break in the tree line, eyes narrowed as he weighed his chances. When Si Guang briefly paused to catch his breath, then seized the moment. He drew 3 gleaming kunai and hurled them in rapid succession toward his target's vital spots. The blades cut through the night air with a faint whisper. Only, Si Guang didn't stagger or cry out. He twisted on the spot, as if sensing danger from every direction. The kunai clanged harmlessly against loose stones at his feet. Then, with a powerful shove, he toppled the last Konoha Jonin who'd been grappling him, and in a heartbeat closed the distance between himself and Nathan. Nathan's heart skipped, surprised by the speed of Si Guang's counterattack. He barely had time to vault backward, tucking in the kunai and drawing his sword in one fluid motion. No matter, the stealth strike had failed, but he was no stranger to a head-on fight. Steeling himself, Nathan advanced, blade at the ready, and eyes locked on Si Guang. In that moment, the 2 warriors stood poised to clash under the pale moonlight, neither willing to yield. Chapter 2 and 22, Retreat. The ringing clang of steel echoed across the clearing. Nathan parried the kunai thrust from Si Guang with a precise flick of his short sword. He braced himself for a drawn-out duel, had even tightened his stance in anticipation of the next exchange, only to watch, utterly baffled, as Si Guang slipped away the instant their blades met. Using the momentum from their collision, his opponent spun on his heel and sprinted toward another skirmish, vanishing into the fray without a backward glance. Nathan stared after him, chest heaving, mind racing. He'd been ready for a fierce fight. Siguang's sudden withdrawal felt like a betrayal of every instinct he'd relied on. Then he realized, it wasn't cowardice, but cunning. Siguang had masked his true intent behind the Sharingan's deceptive glare, tricking Nathan into expecting a confrontation and slipping away the moment the opportunity arose. A grudging respect simmered beneath Nathan's surprise. Few could outfox a shinobi skilled in the Uchiha eye. Still, he had no time to dwell on it. He shook off the shock, holstered his sword, and turned his attention to the surviving Iwakure mid-rank ninja scattered around him. Their armor was cracked, their breaths ragged beneath the dust. As both ally and enemy regrouped for the next wave, Nathan readied himself once more. The battle wasn't over yet, but at least now he knew exactly how dangerous Siguang could be. Nathan watched with cold detachment as the leader's sudden redeployment order sent the enemy ranks into chaos. Panic flickered in their eyes. Every man seemed ready to bolt at the first chance. Then Nathan fixed them with that notorious gaze of his, the one they all whispered about afterward. Memories of his ruthless efficiency paralyzed them. They abandoned their posts and scattered in every direction. Without a word, Nathan sprang forward like a predator. In a blur of motion, he seized several fleeing shinobi and siphoned their chakra as effortlessly as draining water from a basin. When the last strand of energy flowed into him, his reservoir brimmed beyond capacity. Feigning a search for enemy scouts, he slipped away to a hidden alcove on the ridge. There, he sank into perfect stillness and, over the next 20 minutes, poured roughly 16,000 points of chakra into honing his palm fairy technique to new heights. Recharged and more powerful than before, Nathan rejoined the fray on a different stretch of the front line, one that had remained fiercely contested in his absence. No sooner had he assessed the fog of battle than he spotted an opening. With the same ruthless precision he'd shown moments earlier, he struck out, incapacitating several mid- and lower-ranked ninjas from Iwagakure before they even knew what hit them. In that moment, the defenders realized anew why confronting Nathan was a fool's errand. Nathan pressed the last pressure point, activating his chakra absorption technique with both hands. In under 10 seconds, he had completely drained his opponent's chakra. By the time the Hidden Rock team leader arrived, Nathan had already slipped away, leaving no trace behind. No one dared chase him deeper into the jungle. Even the most reckless shinobi knew that pursuing him alone into the undergrowth was less a test of skill than a walk to certain death. Seizing this fear, Nathan struck again and again, each time weaving in and out of their ranks, siphoning chakra and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. By the end of the skirmish, he had harvested over 160,000 units of chakra. His Palm Immortal technique mastery surged to level 6, with 9,120 experience points toward the next milestone of 10,000. He still needed another 130,000 chakra before he could ascend to level 7, but he was well on his way. Just as Nathan readied himself for another strike, word crackled through the battlefield. The Hidden Rock Village's forces were pulling back. Simultaneously, the contingent that had besieged Fenglu Town to the north also began an abrupt retreat. Nathan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. With the enemy withdrawing on all fronts, he would have all the time and chakra he needed to finalize his breakthrough. Perched in the treetops under the pale pre-dawn sky, Nathan watched the Hidden Rock ninjas withdraw below. He knew this battle was far from over. Last night, the entire Hidden Rock force had launched a full-scale assault, hoping to wipe them out in one blow. Unfortunately for them, Minato Namikaze had shattered their hopes. After hours of furious fighting under the cover of darkness, they finally realized their objective was out of reach, and so they fell back. Nathan wasn't surprised. He could already predict their next move. No more massive all-out offensives. Instead, the Hidden Rock Village would dispatch smaller, more agile teams to strike swiftly and vanish before reinforcements arrived. Tactically, these hit-and-run raids were far more effective for them. But for Nathan, they posed a new problem. Fewer opponents meant fewer chances to absorb chakra, and the proportion of Jonin, the village's elite ninja, in those squads would shoot upward. They might not overwhelm him outright, but he wouldn't be able to dismantle them as effortlessly as he had last night. Nathan dropped silently to a lower branch, already plotting how to adapt to an enemy that could no longer be baited into a single, decisive clash. Nathan's temporary chakra shortfall, just 130,000 points, posed no real threat to his progress with the Palm Immortal technique. Even without external chakra supplements, his natural recovery would replenish the deficit in just over 3 days. There was no need to rush. He would advance step by step. After a final sweep of the battlefield, Nathan folded away his sight technique, dropped from the treetops, and returned to camp. He handed the casualty reports to a group of jonin and made his way immediately to the makeshift infirmary. There, he set his medical ninjutsu into motion, tending to the wounded and sharpening his mastery of the Palm Immortal technique with every healing touch. Morning slipped by in a blur. Although the Hidden Stone village forces had retreated, the Shinobi of Konoha remained on high alert, bracing for another strike. Their vigilance proved warranted. No sooner had the sun fully risen than the enemy launched a fresh assault, deploying the very tactics Nathan had predicted. They split into small strike teams and pressed their assault on the stronghold outside Fenglu town. Konoha's commanders, rather than falling back, answered by dispatching their own squads to intercept the Hidden Rock Shinobi. Soon, the fighting sprawled across a 5-kilometer radius. Clashes flared at every ridge, in every valley, a grim and bloody tapestry. Hidden Rock boasted greater numbers and repeatedly tried to overwhelm Konoha's lines. But although the Leaf forces were outnumbered, each of their shinobi wielded superior skill and raw power. Time and again, they repelled larger enemy detachments, leaving the two armies locked in a deadly stalemate. Neither side could break through. It would come down to who ran out of stamina and supplies first. Hours slipped away under the late afternoon sun, and at last, as dusk painted the sky in bruised purples and reds, the furious skirmishing began to peter out. Shattered and spent, ninja on both sides staggered back to their encampments, where they finally allowed themselves to collapse, muscles trembling from exhaustion. High atop a rocky outcrop to the west, Nathan had been in the thick of it, engaging Hidden Rock adversaries in several brutal exchanges. Yet despite his best efforts, he'd drawn only the barest trickle of chakra from the battlefield's ley line, ley strength. The reason was simple. His body could only contain so much energy at once. Night was falling, and with it came a moment to rest and recover. But Nathan knew better than to flatter himself with comfort. Tomorrow, the war would rage on. Nathan's major setback wasn't a lack of talent, but the pace of the fighting. Battles came so rapidly that he never had a chance to properly digest the chakra he absorbed, and so he couldn't build up any reserves. Worse still, the Hidden Rock village had begun targeting him specifically. Word had clearly spread about his unique ability to siphon chakra from opponents. Whenever they faced him, they watched his every move. The moment he tried to drain a captive ninja's chakra, they either executed their own man on the spot or unleashed a powerful ninjutsu to break his concentration. In short, they simply wouldn't let him feed. This strategy drove Nathan crazy, and there was nothing he could do about it. The jonin he faced never came alone. They always worked in pairs. If he held back, he couldn't finish them. If he went all out, he'd trigger a backup response from nearby Iwagakure jonin before he could land the final blow. Either way, he was left empty-handed and frustrated. At least his own safety wasn't in question. His strength was more than enough to protect himself. So Nathan soldiered on, trading blows without the benefit of extra chakra. On the bright side, all this pressure gave him plenty of opportunities to sharpen his swordsmanship. One day soon, he told himself, he'd force an opening big enough to turn the tide. Chapter 223, Operation Decapitation. Sunset gave way to moonrise, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had slipped by. During that time, shinobi from Konohagakure and Iwagakure clashed in brutal combat. Each side paid a heavy price, yet neither secured a decisive advantage. Although Iwagakure wielded two terrifying weapons, the Four Tails and Five Tails Jinchuriki, their leadership had refused to unleash them fully. Likewise, Minato Namikaze of Konoha, though capable of inflicting devastating losses, held back in order to keep the tailed beast hosts under close observation. The result was a stalemate, and now both villages were searching for a way to break the deadlock. Fengliu Town, Konohagakure's forward command post. In a windowless conference room, every jonin stationed at the front lines was gathered to chart the next move. At the head of the long table, Jonin Yuito Omura laid out the battle report. "Over the last 3 days," he began, "our ranks have suffered heavy casualties." Nathan paid little heed to the raw numbers. While Omura droned on, his gaze drifted across the table to the man sitting opposite him. Minato Namikaze, the yellow flash, was even more striking in person than Nathan had imagined. Poised and unreadable, Minato's calm presence drew every eye in the room, Nathan's included. This was the first time he'd ever been so close to Konoha's legendary fourth Hokage. For the past 3 days, Nathan had been too busy with the pressing demands of the war to return to the Mountain Foot base, and so he'd never actually met Minato Namikaze in person. He'd known the fourth Hokage had arrived before the conflict erupted, but Minato had kept himself hidden, revealing only to senior shinobi through Omura Yuito. In fact, this was their first true introduction. Standing before Minato now, Nathan could immediately see why the villagers favored him over Orochimaru. Where Orochimaru's presence was cold and severe, Minato exuded warmth and quiet confidence. It was no surprise he'd easily outshone Orochimaru in the bids for Hokage. Even with Sarutobi Hiruzen's influence still strong, most of the village's hopes were pinned on Minato's gentle strength. As if sensing Nathan's gaze, Minato met his eyes. For a moment, their stares locked, and then Minato offered a kind smile and dipped his head in greeting. Nathan returned the nod, then respectfully lowered his eyes. Even amid the Nine-Tails' onslaught, we could choose to spare our enemy's life. By doing so, the rift between the Uchiha clan and the village could be greatly reduced, and with careful diplomacy afterward, real friendship might even blossom. Nathan considered this quietly. He didn't feel a profound bond with the Uchiha, but he stood under their name and had benefited from their goodwill. This small act of mercy was the least he could offer. Once Minato Namikaze became Hokage, he certainly wouldn't want to fan the flames of resentment. With Shisui Uchiha, an even-tempered clan member, mediating, they could persuade Minato to rethink the village's discriminatory policies. Such a gesture would pave the way for genuine reconciliation, and in time, old wounds would heal. Of course, these were only Nathan's early ideas. Whether they ever come to pass depends on how much he can achieve in the year ahead. After all, you have to seize every opportunity. Nathan leaned back, fingers drumming against his thigh as he weighed his options. Until his power reached its peak, he wouldn't dare meddle with Minato Namikaze's destiny. At worst, when the Uchiha clan faced extermination, he could intervene. One crushing blow to knock Itachi Uchiha out of the picture, perhaps even end him outright. But there was no rush. What if, when that critical moment arrived, he still hadn't grown strong enough? Then he'd have only himself to blame. If he hadn't pushed his limits and fully exploited the proficiency panel to master overwhelming strength, dying at the hands of Itachi and Obito would be the direct result of his own complacency. Could he truly rewrite the plot by saving Minato or sparing the Uchiha clan? Ever since Nathan had arrived in this world, the storyline had already shifted around him. It was merely a question of how obvious those changes would be. As long as his power continued to climb, the plot would bend in his wake. In this extraordinary realm, power didn't just break bones, it reshaped reality. The stronger you became, the more the world quivered in response. Only by completely cutting himself off, avoiding every connection, could he hope to leave the original sequence of events intact. But why would he handicap himself that way? Nathan hovered high above the battlefield, letting his gaze roam across the horizon. Power wasn't something to be tamed, it was something that reshaped the world around you. If he possessed this strength, it was up to others to adapt to him, not the other way around. True endurance had its limits. One day, you simply stopped enduring. And a truly powerful person never cowered before the twists of fate. His mission wasn't to follow the tide, but to become the tide. What excitement could the narrow ambitions of the 5 great ninja villages offer him? The universe stretched farther than any of them could imagine. With chakra at their disposal, They could colonize entire planets. Yet here they were, squabbling over scraps in this muddy backwater. Their tiny vision shackled their potential. Nathan's real task, once he attained absolute power, would be to turn their eyes upward, beyond the wooden palisades and hidden villages, out into the cosmos. After all, their true destination lay among the stars. "Jonin Nathan," a voice called out behind him, dragging him back from his reverie. He recognized the speaker instantly. Yuito Omura, commander of their reconnaissance unit. Nathan blinked, then collected his thoughts. Yuito stepped forward, expression expectant. "So, what do you think of the plan?" Nathan hesitated only a heartbeat before nodding. "I'm on board." A satisfied smile spread across Yuito's face. "Excellent. Then let's get to work. Tonight, Nathan, you'll lead the senior shinobi team into the Hidden Rock Camp. Minato, you and your squad will stand by to provide support." Earlier today, after Omura Yuito's report on the base's losses over the past 3 days, the council gathered to devise a plan, codename Operation Decapitation. The objective was clear. Nathan and his hand-picked elite must infiltrate the Hidden Rock Camp, locate the enemy headquarters, and signal Minato Namikaze to strike at their leadership. Meanwhile, the remainder of the forces would launch diversionary attacks along the perimeter to cover the withdrawal. Despite the danger, Nathan only paused a moment before nodding. He had absolute faith in his skills. Minato, whose role was to arrive as the decisive blow, had even fewer reservations. His mastery of the Flying Thunder God technique made deep penetration almost routine. "I'll be ready," Minato said without hesitation, reaching into his pouch to withdraw a gleaming three-pronged kunai. He handed it to Nathan with a steady hand. Nathan caught the weapon, feeling its weight and balance. Tonight, at the heart of enemy territory, the fate of the hidden rock would be decided. Nathan picked up the unusual kunai and examined it closely. A thin talisman was wrapped around the handle, its 4 characters reading, "Sword of Ninja Love." Instantly, he recognized Minato Namikaze's trademark seal, the famed Flying Thunder God technique. Unlike the elaborate scrollwork of the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju's teleportation mark, Minato's was deceptively simple, just a line of text imbued with chakra. The moment Nathan's fingers brushed the talisman, Minato would sense its activation. In an instant, the 4th Hokage could transport him straight to the battlefield. Knowing this, Nathan's confidence. With the Flying Thunder God technique at his disposal, the plan had an almost guaranteed chance of success. No matter the risks ahead, he was ready to make his move. Chapter 224, Promotion and Infiltration Night, had fallen over Fungliu Town, and within the fortress's dimly lit courtyard, Nathan concluded another round of practice with the Palm Immortal technique. Just as he lowered his hand, a sudden spark of insight ignited in his mind, an unmistakable sign that he'd broken through to a higher level of mastery. He slid his fingers across the air, summoning his status menu. There it was, Palm Immortal technique. Upgraded from level 6 to level 7. This marked the second time one of his abilities had reached level 7, the first being his Reflection Heart technique. The jump in power at this new tier was astonishing. Nathan allowed himself a satisfied smile. In the entire shinobi world, few practitioners could rival his command of the Palm Immortal technique. Now, treating superficial wounds would be all but effortless, and with minimal drain on the patient's life force. After all, medical ninjutsu like this one accelerates cell division to heal injuries, and the more refined the technique, the gentler its impact on the body. Tomorrow, he reminded himself, the real test would begin, infiltrating the enemy's stronghold under cover of darkness. But for tonight, Nathan savored the quiet triumph of his hard-won advancement. The number of times human cells can divide is inherently limited. Overstimulating them exhausts their remaining divisions, and in turn, shortens a person's life. But after Nathan upgraded his Palm Immortal technique to its 7th level, this drawback was greatly reduced. Level 7 doesn't magically increase cell divisions. Instead, it channels more chakra into each division, maximizing healing with fewer replications, and thus preserving his lifespan. That's just the healing side. The body-strengthening effects he prized had also been enhanced. Focusing his mind, Nathan formed the familiar hand seals and activated the Palm Immortal technique once more. Instantly, he sensed the condensed Yang escape chakra was purer, more potent than before. Gently, he guided it into his meridians, letting it seep into every fiber of muscle and sinew, every organ and tissue. A wave of soothing warmth washed over him, so intense that he couldn't help but let out a relieved groan. 3 minutes later, Nathan's eyes snapped open. He ran through the numbers in his head. To build the foundation he needed for his next evolution, he still had to execute the Palm Immortal technique roughly 8,000 more times. At 150 chakra each, that came to 1.2 million chakra points in total. Since he naturally recovered 42,000 points a day, even with no outside supplementation, it would take him less than a month to finish the process. By then, his physique attribute would climb from 13 to 14, and only then could he attempt to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. Of course, any extra chakra he managed to scavenge along the way would only speed things up. His pulse raced at the thought of ambushing a few rock ninja and draining their chakra on the spot. But Nathan slapped his cheeks briskly, forcing himself to calm down. Now wasn't the time to rush in. Even if he somehow grabbed all 1.2 million chakra points right now, his body still needed those weeks to digest and integrate the power. Patience, he reminded himself. Real strength came from steady progress, not reckless shortcuts. Nathan ran the numbers. With an intense exercise cycle every 3 minutes, followed by a 4-hour rest, he'd need at least 20 days to complete his evolution. That regimen consumed 60,000 chakra points a day. His body could naturally recover about 42,000, leaving a shortfall of 18,000 each day. It was a hefty sum, but far from impossible. There was no need to hurry. His real priority lay ahead, infiltrating the enemy camp. Chasing off stray rock ninjas was a distraction he could afford to postpone. In the span of 2 hours, night deepened over Fengliu town. A sharp whistle split the darkness, and once more, the town sprang to life. Weary Konoha shinobi emerged from their quarters, faces drained of color. They gathe, read silently, shouldered their gear, and filed out through the gates into the starless black. Waiting beyond the walls were the rock ninjas, fresh troops in a relentless, rotating siege. Their strategy was clear: use overwhelming numbers and constant pressure to grind down the defenders' resolve, day and night. Nathan watched them go, steeling himself for the trial to come. Nathan had been waiting for this moment ever since their plan to wear down the rock ninjas had come into play. For 2 days, their constant skirmishes had forced the enemy to remain on edge, exhausting both their strength and their resolve. Now, with Minato Namikaze's special kunai secured at his belt and every other piece of equipment double-checked, Nathan slipped out of the village under cover of dawn. He met his team just outside the town gates, 2 elite jonin, renowned for their skill in stealth and assassination, and a Hyuga clan reconnaissance specialist whose Byakugan would prove indispensable. Nathan nodded to his comrades and led them eastward toward the rock ninja encampment. The 4 moved swiftly but cautiously, every footstep measured against the potential for traps or enemy patrols. An hour later, they crouched atop a low hill overlooking the fortified camp. Thanks to Nathan's Sharingan and the Hyuga shinobi's Byakugan, they had evaded hidden pitfalls and ambushes without incident. Now they studied the enemy's defenses. Sharpened stakes ringed the perimeter, patrols moved in overlapping patterns, and watchtowers loomed at each corner. Penetrating the camp by force would be suicide. Nathan exchanged a silent glance with his team. The real work was just beginning. Nathan gave a subtle hand signal to the Hyuga shinobi at his side, indicating it was time to probe for an opening. Hyuga Crimson acknowledged with a slight nod, folded her arms across her chest, and centered her chakra before activating her Byakugan. In an instant, her vision sharpened to reveal everything within range: the placement of the rock ninjas' defenses, the patterns of their patrols, and if she could find it, their hidden headquarters. Minutes stretched on. 15 of them slipped by as Crimson methodically charted the enemy camp. Patrol teams strolled past within yards of their hiding place several times. Though the rock ninja never suspected their presence, the constant tension began to show. Nathan caught the quickening breaths of his 2 companions. He raised a finger in a quiet gesture and mouthed, "Breathe slow." Realizing they'd lost their composure, the pair forced themselves to inhale and exhale in measured rhythm, posture steadied once more. Crimson, still peering through the world in white-hot detail, finally lowered her gaze. Another quarter hour ticked away in the hush of the night. Just as another squad of rock ninjas strode by a short distance ahead, Hinata Feihong finally lowered her gaze and deactivated her Byakugan. Nathan watched her, brows drawn together in concern. Catching his look, Hinata offered a confident nod and silently signaled that she needed a few minutes to recover. Sweat beaded on her forehead, clear evidence that she'd held her Byakugan open far longer than was comfortable. Nathan nodded in understanding and agreed. After all, once her Byakugan had rested, they'd need its full power to slip unseen into the rock ninja encampment. Chapter 225, Exposed. After a brief rest behind a rocky outcrop, Hinata Crimson gave Nathan a firm nod and activated her Byakugan. Wordlessly, she stepped forward, beckoning the others to fall in behind her. Nathan's Sharingan sprang to life in response, and the two remaining shinobi followed in silence. Thanks to the reconnaissance Hinata had already carried out, they slipped past the outer rock ninja patrols without a sound and entered the camp's perimeter. Hinata halted at the edge of a tent-lined pathway and held up a hand. "Stay close." Nathan and the others exchanged quick, knowing looks and mirrored her gesture. Winding their way deeper into the encampment, they threaded through tight corridors of tents and supply wagons, avoiding every fixed guard post. Each time a patrol neared, Hinata's Byakugan flared, exposing enemy positions and warning them just in time to melt into the shadows. They moved like phantoms, unseen, unfelt, unheard. Such is the true power of the Byakugan. Every hidden trap and concealed sentry laid bare. With the rock ninja defenses illuminated before them, the once impenetrable camp now lay open to infiltration. A few minutes later, Nathan and the others, led by Hinata Feihong, slipped through the underbrush and came to a halt just outside the rock village's hidden headquarters. From their vantage point among the trees, Nathan could see two Chunin standing guard at a yawning cave entrance carved into the mountainside. Beyond them lay the dark mouth of the underground complex. He recalled Hinata's briefing. The Rock Village Command Center was entirely subterranean, created by a massive earth-release jutsu that hollowed out a vast chamber far below the surface. There was only one official entry and exit, the cave before them, and every other tunnel was sealed behind powerful chakra barriers. Any unauthorized intruder would trigger an alarm, alerting every shinobi inside. But the two visible Chunin weren't the only protectors. Hinata pointed out two more rock ninja, hidden in the shadows, monitoring the entrance with keen eyes. Under such tight security, a direct assault was out of the question, and without the secret protocols or clearance codes, even a stealthy infiltration was impossible. Nathan's heart pounded. Retreating now meant precious time lost. As the saying went, delay leads to change, and any delay here could cost them their one chance at success. Nathan paused for a moment, then signaled the two specialized Jonin, elite operatives trained in stealth and assassination, to take care of the hidden sentries. The pair in plain sight would draw attention, but the real threats lurked in the shadows. Nathan knew total exposure was inevitable. Once the mission to behead their target began, secrecy would be shot anyway. Better to get it over with. He cast a quick glance at Hiyori Feihong, whose Byakugan, often called White Eyes, swept the surrounding area. Hiyori gave a curt nod. The coast was clear. Nathan gave the order. Without hesitation, the two Jonin split left and right, melting into the darkness as they advanced on the two Rock Village ninja sentries hidden nearby. Both were merely Chunin, competent but hardly worth assigning top-tier operatives. There was no need to expend elite resources on such low-level guards. Nathan crouched in the shadow of the camp's perimeter wall, watching the two Jonin posted outside the headquarters gate. This place was the heart of the base, ringed by several layers of security that kept ordinary strangers out, so it should have been impenetrable. Tonight, however, his team had gained the upper hand. When Hinata Feihong's voice crackled quietly in his ear, "Both teammates are in position," he knew the moment had come. He slipped away from the gate, melting into a deserted alcove. Hands steady, he wove the required seals and whispered the transformation jutsu. His features blurred and reformed until, in perfect imitation, he stood there in the armor and forehead protector of an Iwagakure Jonin. With a confident stride, he turned toward the two guards. From a distance, They recognized one of their own and let their postures slacken. As Nathan approached, one guard called out, "State your business. Show your warrant." Nathan offered a curt nod, lifting his right arm in a gesture as though he were drawing the document from his sleeve. Both men leaned forward, eyes flicking to his hand. Before either could react, Nathan's fist shot forward. A single, soundless strike sent the first guard sprawling unconscious. The second man gaped for a moment, and then froze in terror. Nathan's transformation dropped away in an instant, revealing those unmistakable crimson eyes, the Sharingan, blazing red under the moonlight. The guard's breath caught in his throat as he realized too late whose side this Jonin really served. At the instant their eyes met, Nathan unleashed his Sharingan's hypnotic power. One piercing glance and the two palace guards froze dead in their tracks. The man who'd already slumped forward was likewise seized by Nathan's illusion Sharingan, his casual hand gesture executing the genjutsu in the blink of an eye. At that same moment, two Iwagakure ninja hidden nearby sensed the disturbance. Before they could raise the alarm, shadowy figures slipped in behind them. In one smooth motion, both ambushers had their throats cut. These were the squad's two covert specialists, elite Jonin who excelled at silent kills. After double-checking that no threat remained, they dragged the bodies out of sight and melted back toward Nathan. By the time they returned, Nathan himself had finished off the two palace guards and concealed their bodies. He turned to his three teammates, who stood ready at his side. "Gear up. We move underground," he ordered, his voice as calm as it was cold. "Fei Hong, you take point." "Yes, Captain," they replied without hesitation. Though Nathan was young for a squad leader, his authority was absolute, and none would question his command. Nathan, Hinata, Fei Hong, and the others stood in a dimly lit tunnel, their silhouettes merging into one. In unison, they activated the transformation technique, taking on the appearance of ordinary rock ninjas. With Nathan leading the way, they slipped deeper into the underground complex. Hinata jerked back her sleeves and opened her Byakugan. Through the pale glow of her white eyes, she could peer past stone walls and around corners, perfect for spotting hidden defenses as they hunted for the Rock Village's secret command center. Nathan glanced at her. "How will we find it?" Hinata's lip curled into a knowing smile. "It's simple. The headquarters will be guarded by Jonin-level chakra, strong, focused, and concentrated. Anywhere we detect that signature, we'll be close." Silence fell as they crept forward, relying on Hinata's vision to guide them. Each step echoed against cold stone, every breath a reminder of the risk. Minutes stretched on, and Nathan's hand hovered near his shuriken pouch, ready for anything. Suddenly, Hinata froze. She raised a slender finger. "Stop!" Nathan and Fei Hong halted behind her, eyes scanning her calm profile. "What is it?" Nathan whispered. Using her Byakugan, Hinata peered again, her brow furrowing. "The guards nearby, they're on the move. They're searching this area." Nathan's pulse quickened. The underground complex was supposed to be locked down, secrets and Jonin stratagems hidden behind layers of security. The Rock Village's guard detail seldom stirred unless there was a breach. If they were patrolling now, something had gone wrong. "We can't let them find us," Nathan said under his breath. He glanced down the corridor, tension coiling in his shoulders. "What's our next move?" Hinata closed her Byakugan and sheathed her gentle fist. "We wait for the patrol to pass, then slip past their blind spots. Stick close, stay low, and follow me." With that, the four crouched against the tunnel wall, hearts pounding as footsteps drew nearer. The fate of their mission depended on stealth and on trusting Hinata's sight in the darkness. Nathan watched the guards shift their positions, a clear sigh. Guan, they had reason to move. Judging by their behavior, only one conclusion made sense. They were hunting the four of them. In other words, their cover had been blown. Not long ago, a Chunin from Iwagakure arrived at headquarters on official business. As he neared the main gate, he noticed the guard post was deserted. Alarm bells rang in his mind. He scoured the area and soon stumbled over the guard's body. Realizing something was terribly wrong, he didn't hesitate. He sounded the alarm. Headquarters reacted instantly, ordering every available sentry to scour the underground chambers for intruders, namely, Nathan and his three companions. Chapter 226. Goodbye. Nathan's mind raced, but he wasn't the only one thinking through their exposure. Behind him, Scarlet Hinata's voice was low but urgent. "Captain, what should we do now?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to Scarlet. "How far is the enemy headquarters from here?" Scarlet glanced down the dimly lit corridor, then back at him. "If we follow this passage and take 2 right turns, it's roughly 200 meters to their command post." 200 meters, Nathan echoed, weighing the distance. He straightened his shoulders and issued his order without hesitation. "Forget the guards. We move at top speed. We have to get as close as possible, now." He broke into a run. Scarlet and the others exchanged determined looks, then fell in behind him. The corridor walls blurred past as their boots pounded the floor. In seconds, they reached a dead end. Without missing a beat, Nathan pivoted 90 degrees to the right, and Scarlet led them down the next stretch of hallway. Every second counted. Ahead lay the enemy command center, and whatever risks awaited them there. But Nathan's resolve was clear. They would reach their target, no matter what stood in their way. Nathan paused as he spotted 3 Iwagakure teams at the far end of the corridor, 12 ninja in all. He let his gaze sweep over them, reading their chakra levels, 2 jonin and 10 shunin. With his head bowed in an unassuming manner, he resumed walking toward them, Hinata crimson and the other 3 following quietly. The rock ninjas immediately tensed. One of the jonin stepped forward, voice ringing out, "Halt! You're unauthorized. Submit to inspection at once." Nathan ignored him and kept coming. The jonin drew a kunai and warned again. "I said stop, now!" Only then did Nathan come to a halt. Hinata and the rest froze as well. The dozen or so Iwagakure shinobi exchanged cautious looks, but seeing the group stand down, they quietly eased their guard. Nathan had been waiting for this moment. The special jonin in front of him opened his mouth to speak, but Nathan didn't give him the chance. He shot the man a piercing look, and in that instant, his eyes flashed crimson. "Sharingan? Damn!" The jonin started to warn the others, but fear froze his words. Too late. Their gazes locked, and Nathan triggered his dojutsu, weaving a silent hypnosis that seized the jonin's will. The seasoned shinobi's body went slack under the spell. In one swift motion, 6 razor-sharp shurikens sprang into being in Nathan's palms. Shoo! The blades twirled through the air. One whistled straight for the throat of the immobilized special jonin. The other 5 arced toward the 11 Iwagakure ninja massed behind him. At the same moment, Hinata Scarlet and the rest sprang into action, hurling kunai and shuriken to back him up. "Watch out!" A second Iwa special jonin shouted, but the warning came too late. The battlefield erupted in a shower of metal as the ambush unfolded. Despite Nathan's meticulous calculations and split-second adjustments, the assault was devastating. Of the 12 Iwagakure shinobi caught in his strike, 5 lay dead, 3 were wounded, and only 4 managed to flee unscathed. In a heartbeat, Nathan slipped past the elite jonin, whose throat he'd pierced with a shuriken, and closed in on the 7 surviving stone shinobi. The sheer ferocity of his attack shattered the subtle flow of his transformation technique, and the borrowed guise of an Iwagakure jonin dissolved, revealing his true form. "Ghost Sword Nathan," one of the shaken jonin gasped, recognition and disbelief etched on his face. Nathan's lips curved into a faint smile. Terrified, the jonin shut his eyes and stumbled backward. Seizing the moment, Nathan unleashed his phantom blade technique, a cascade of illusory swords that fractured the enemy's vision and struck without warning. One by one, 6 Iwagakure chunin crumpled to the ground. By the time the last echo of impact faded, only Nathan and the aftermath remained in the clearing. Moments later, Hinata Crimso, En and her squad crested a nearby ridge. They had heard the whisper of the Ghost Sword's legend, and now, surveying the scene, they understood precisely why that name sent shivers through friend and foe alike. Nathan's swordplay was so unpredictable that the 3 Iwa shinobi watching him could only stare in stunned silence. He didn't care. After dispatching the rock ninja in the courtyard, he charged forward without hesitation. Hinata, Crimson, and the others rallied their chakra and fell in step behind him. In mere seconds, they reached the end of the narrow corridor. Nathan veered right, and beyond a few dozen meters lay the Iwagakure command post. But the final stretch would not be unguarded. No sooner had Nathan taken 2 strides than a deafening boom thundered from the side, hurling earth and gravel into the air. Nathan skidded to a halt and dove out of the blast's path. When the dust cleared, a single figure stood between him and their goal. Squinting through the haze, he recognized the newcomer, Kari of the Iwagakure Demolition Force. Nathan had tangled with Kari twice before, once watching in disbelief as Kari shattered his dagger with nothing but his bare hands before escaping in a cloud of smoke and shrapnel. Now Kari's grin as he cracked his knuckles told Nathan this fight was far from over. Nathan was sure that his last strike, Wind Release, Windblade, had left a deep impression on his opponent. He cast a careful glance at Sho's chest and abdomen, half expecting to see a long, ugly scar beneath the fabric. At that moment, fear flickered in Sho's gaunt features. If he hadn't managed to break away when he did, he'd be dead by now. The wound had kept him bedridden for over a week, and even though the flesh had mended, spikes of pain still flared up unpredictably. His overall strength had taken a hit. Too, intense fighting made his chest throb and disrupted the flow of his chakra. Yet, his signature escape techniques required close-quarters combat to be fully effective, leaving him caught between his strategy and his body's limits. Panic clouded Sho's eyes for an instant before it hardened into murderous intent. He stared Nathan down with a deadly glare. Nathan met that look without flinching, then shifted his attention beyond Sho. There, several squads of rock ninjas stood at the ready, forming a protective ring around a heavily fortified chamber. Nathan knew whatever lay inside that room was the true prize. If he wanted to achieve his mission, he'd have to get past them all. Nathan slipped silently through the dimly lit tunnels until he recognized the unmistakable layout of the Rock Ninja command post. Without hesitation, he reached into his pouch and drew the three-pronged kunai that Minato Namikaze had entrusted to him. The instant Sho saw the weapon, he assumed Nathan was about to strike. With barely a second's warning, he charged forward, chakra crackling around his fist, and drove a blow at Nathan's face. Sensing the explosive energy behind the strike, Nathan rolled aside just in time. His attacker's fist slammed into the stone wall with a muffled boom. Sho snarled and pressed his advantage. Twisting his body, he brought his left fist snapping toward Nathan's midsection. Once more, Nathan evaded, this time slipping sideways while channeling a sliver of chakra into his kunai and tracing the talisman seal at its hilt. In the same fluid motion, he launched the blade at Sho. Sho reacted instantly, ducking his head as the kunai whistled past him. It struck the ground just a few feet short of the Rock Ninja squad standing guard behind him and embedded itself in the stone floor. Unfazed by the near miss, Sho straightened, eyes cold with determination, and readied himself for another ferocious attack. Just then, Nathan caught a sudden stir behind him. He spun around and saw three figures emerging from the shadows, and at their feet lay the very kunai he'd just thrown. Chapter 227, Forced Killing, Yellow Flash. Sho's eyes snapped open in alarm as he whirled to face the newcomer. It could only be Minato Namikaze. Flanking the legendary shinobi were a Nara clan jonin and a Yamanaka clan jonin. In all, 7 jonin from Konoha now filled the compound, reinforcements that outclassed the Rock Village guards and even their own jonin commanders. None, Minato included, would ever worry over ordinary jonin's strength. It was his unrivaled skill that made him Konoha's deadliest weapon. Minato's gaze swept the yard and locked onto the heavily fortified chamber ahead. Nathan, once known as Qingming, caught his eye, and Minato tilted his head, seeking confirmation. Before Nathan could speak, Hinata Feihong stepped forward, her voice ringing out, "The target's in there." Her words carried clearly across the stone courtyard, leaving Sho with no choice but to face the reality of their siege. Nathan didn't hesitate for a second. Once he'd confirmed his allies were ready, he vanished in a streak of golden light, the yellow flash, and reappeared amid the Iwagakure middle and lower rank shinobi. The sheer force of his presence drove them back a half step before they even realized what was happening. A piercing shout came from the rear. "Scared? Then follow me." A moment later, a veteran shinobi of Iwagakure broke from the ranks and lunged straight at Nathan. "Lord Kuroki!" someone yelled, recognizing the newcomer. Immediately, a handful of seasoned ninjas backed Kuroki Itten and surged forward. As commander of Iwagakure's assault on Konoha's Furyu Town stronghold, Kuroki's skill sat somewhere between a typical jonin and an elite jonin. On his own, he wouldn't be a match for Nathan, But his sudden charge emboldened the others, and soon a wave of senior Iwagakure shinobi closed in, turning Nathan's swift attack into a far more complex challenge. As soon as the Iwagakure Jonin moved in, more of their shinobi swarmed the nearby Konoha fighters. The narrow corridors were suddenly jam-packed with combatants, and in such tight quarters, nobody dared unleash a powerful ninjutsu. One wrong move, and an ally could be caught in the blast. Perfect for Sho. The confined space played right into his explosive fighting style, and with Nathan barred from using chakra attacks, Sho pressed his advantage without hesitation. Even the unexpected arrival of Minato Namikaze only paused Sho for a heartbeat. His real target was still Nathan, standing just out of reach. The moment the skirmish flared, Sho lashed out with a brutal right hook aimed squarely at Nathan's chin. A rushing wind accompanied the blow. Nathan twisted at the waist, leaning back just in time to dodge the punch, only to see Sho's fist detonate midair in a burst of concussive force. The shockwave slammed Nathan full in the chest, driving him backward into the corridor wall. He staggered, taking several heavy steps to regain his footing, every breath sending dull pains through his ribs and bruised organs. The close-range explosion had left its mark. Nathan barely registered the blow. His 13-point physique shrugged it off. He braced himself to recover, but Sho gave him no respite. With a single step forward, Sho launched another punch, chakra crackling around his fist. Nathan dared not block. Instead, he tapped the ground, slid back, and opened distance between them. He'd expected Sho to detonate air chakra again, hoping to knock him off balance, but the strike fizzled as Sho's chakra dispersed prematurely. Seizing the moment, Sho immediately surged forward and drove his fist into Nathan's ribs. A flicker of disappointment crossed Nathan's face. If Sho had truly exploded the air, Nathan could have retreated completely, putting himself out of reach and erasing the failed kunai throw from the battle. But Sho's keen combat instincts recognized the mismatch in their power. Rather than press his advantage, Sho deliberately eased his attack, choosing to show mercy. Nathan braced himself and continued absorbing the fallout from his earlier decision, in blow after blow while doing his best to evade each one. But he wasn't concerned. As the old saying went, the first strike is the hardest, the second weaker, and by the third, you're spent. Nathan didn't believe Sho could keep up such a relentless assault forever. The moment his opponent's offense slackened, Nathan would strike. Boom! 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 Explosions rocked the chamber. Nathan twisted and ducked as Sho hammered the stone walls, each punch unleashing eruptive waves of chakra that shattered masonry and sent debris flying. Then Nathan noticed it. A flicker of pain on Sho's face, followed by the merest pause before the next strike. What most would have missed stood out like a beacon through Nathan's Sharingan. That microsecond of hesitation was all he needed. With a sudden shift of his hips, he slipped past Sho's guard. In a single fluid motion, Nathan lunged forward and drove the tip of his blade straight toward his opponent's heart. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Nathan had already fought Sho twice before, and he'd learned a crucial lesson. Half-hearted strikes wouldn't do. If he targeted anything less than a vital point, he'd only prolong the exchange, and human flesh and bone couldn't withstand his explosive style for long. Every stroke had to count. Each had to threaten Sho's life enough to make him break off and seek cover. Sure enough, Nathan's blade drove straight for Sho's heart. Faced with that deadly intent, Sho froze, then abandoned his own assault and rolled aside. If he'd stood his ground, he'd have received a wound so grave it would have spelled certain death. No one wants to die, and so he chose the only option left, dodge. But that very dodge was an admission of defeat. The tide of the battle had swung irrevocably. Without giving Sho a moment to recover, Nathan pressed his advantage. He flowed from one stroke to the next, second, third, fourth. His swordplay a continuous storm of steel. Each slash built on the last, momentum locked and loaded, every ounce of power focused through the blade's point. Sho found himself on the defensive at last, forced to parry blows he could no longer meet head-on. The remorseless rhythm of Nathan's attacks left no room for hesitation, and if Sho hesitated again, it would be the end. Nathan's every strike sought Sho's vital points, forcing him onto the defensive. He blocked and parried as best he could, But with each passing moment, he felt Nathan's blade slicing more confidently than before, an unsettling reminder that his rival's swordsmanship had sharpened since their last encounter. Time dragged on in the narrow corridor until, with a sudden hiss of steel, Nathan's blade tore into Shou's flesh. A red streak blossomed across his arm, and searing pain contorted his face. He barely registered Nathan's next advance before a desperate thought sharpened his resolve. I can't keep this up. I need to disrupt his rhythm. Scanning the walls on either side, Shou lunged back just in time to evade another precise strike. Gathering his chakra, he rammed his fist into the plasterboard. With a thunderous crack, the wall ruptured, sending a spray of dust and rubble crashing down. Through the ragged hole, debris piled up, buying Shou a precious moment's respite as Nathan's pursuit faltered. Nathan cleared his throat twice, glanced around to make sure his teammates were out of earshot, then sprang into action. Hands already forming seals, he unleashed the fire-style, great fireball technique. A roaring inferno erupted from his palms, filling the corridor with scalding heat and choking smoke. Shou, caught off guard, cursed under his breath. He slapped both feet against the floor and backed away just in time, then frantically wove his own hand signs. With a thunderous shout, he invoked Earth-style, earth and land return. Slamming his right palm into the stone floor, he yanked up a massive slab of rock, sealing off the corridor just as Nathan's fireball slammed into it. Boom! The impact rattled the sealed passage so violently that dust rained down from the ceiling. The bat, Tlefield, fell silent for a heartbeat as everyone turned toward the commotion, wondering if the ceiling might collapse next. Then, somewhere beyond the newly formed barrier, a sharp crack split the air. Shou's attention snapped to the corridor as a sharp crack split the stone slab blocking his path. Hairline fissures raced outward, swallowing the entire barrier in a heartbeat. I can't hold this much longer, he thought. Without wasting another ounce of chakra on his ninjutsu, Shou drove both feet into the floor, sprang to his feet, and blasted backward. Moments later, the slab gave way in a thunderous collapse, raining jagged fragments to the ground. A wall of searing flame burst through the gap, roaring toward him like a molten tide, but Shou was already clear of its path. No sooner had he steadied himself than a razor-sharp wind blade lunged forth, slicing through the lingering heat and racing down the corridor straight at him. But instead of panic, a confident smile curved Shou's lips. He had expected this. Nathan always favored that lethal combination, wind-style, wind blade. Calmly, Shou readied himself for the next move, fully prepared for the battle to come. Shou couldn't believe he'd been caught off guard by an attack he'd clearly anticipated. The narrow corridor ahead was engulfed in searing flames. No one could have passed through without taking severe burns. So of course Nathan had chosen this moment to unleash his wind-style ninjutsu in a surprise strike. It was the only tactic that made sense, and the timing was perfect. Mentally braced for the assault, Shou tracked the faint whoosh of air and twisted his body just in time. The razor-sharp wind blade hissed past him, missing by mere inches. Relief washed over him, until the inferno flickered aside and a pale green figure strode through the firelight. Two blood-red eyes locked onto his, and a suffocating darkness began to pull at his mind. How? How is this possible? Shou gasped, terror rising in his throat. Nothing is impossible, Nathan's calm voice whispered through the haze. Before Shou could summon another thought, Nathan's short sword shot forward. Steel met flesh as the blade plunged into Shou's chest, right over his heart. He never escaped the illusion. His eyes glazed over, and the world slipped away in a final, silent moment. Chapter 228, Mission continues. A soft click rang out as Nathan drew his dagger, and Shou's body slumped to the ground. The emerald glow that had surrounded him flickered and died. That shimmering light was nothing more than wind flow chakra. Nathan had learned to coat his entire body in it after mastering the instant sword technique, to fuse with his blade and dash at impossible speeds over short distances. But the dagger in his hand now was an ordinary weapon, forged without the precious chakra-conductive metals needed to channel his power fully. He couldn't unleash the instant sword technique with it. Instead, the wind flow chakra he'd spread around himself served only as a heat shield, protecting him from the inferno raging nearby. Shou had assumed the sea of flames would keep Nathan at bay. Instead, Nathan used his wind flow barrier to force his way straight through the firewall. Caught off guard by his sudden appearance in the heart of the blaze, Sho never stood a chance. Nathan closed the distance in an instant, activating his Genjutsu Sharingan to drag his opponent's consciousness into a perfect illusion. Within moments the trap snapped shut, and Sho was dead, undone by his own inertia-bound thinking. But Nathan had not emerged unscathed. Although his wind release, air escape jutsu shielded him from the worst of the flames, the superheated air still seared his skin. Patches of redness and swelling blossomed across his body, and several areas developed blistering burns. Each breath burned in his lungs and prickled his trachea. Thankfully, these injuries were well within the scope of his newly achieved Level 7 medical ninjutsu. Nathan paused to assess the damage, then formed a series of precise hand seals. "Palm immortal technique," he murmured. Instantly, a surge of warm yang chakra washed over him, tenderly knitting skin, soothing scorched flesh, and easing the sting with a steady, restorative pulse. As the healing energy spread, Nathan allowed himself a moment's reprieve, his body mending, his mind already turning to the next challenge. Soon the redness and swelling receded, the blisters vanished, and the fire in his lungs and throat felt as though a rush of cool water was soothing every burning fiber. Nathan couldn't help but draw a parallel to Tsunade's creation rebirth or Hashirama's unrivaled healing. His own recovery felt astonishing. Of course, it wasn't anywhere near that legendary level yet, but as his palm fairy technique and physical conditioning continued to improve, he was certain it was only a matter of time before he closed the gap. When that day came, his capacity for self-protection would be vastly greater. Lost in that thought, he scarcely noticed time passing. In under 30 seconds, Nathan had nearly eradicated all visible injuries. At that moment, a single rock ninja slipped into view. Earlier, the explosions and roaring flames had forced everyone to retreat. Now, the battlefield lay eerily silent, and someone naturally had to come forward and scout. Nathan crouched in the shadows of the rocky outcrop, watching 3 Iwagakure ninja advance cautiously along the narrow pass. Their footsteps crunched against loose stone, and each held a hand near their weapons, eyes flicking from side to side. He waited for the perfect moment. In an instant, Nathan sprang forward with his flash body technique, a blur of motion that left the 3 shinobi reeling. Before they could draw breath, he reached out and murmured a hypnotic incantation, snaring the first man in a binding trance. The second turned to face him, tension in every line of his stance. Nathan activated his Sharingan and wove a potent genjutsu, the ninja's eyes glazing over as he fell under Nathan's control. The third attacker barely had time to register danger. With a swift, silent movement, Nathan thrust a dagger into the man's lower abdomen. The shinobi doubled over, clutching the blade, eyes wild with shock. He tried to speak, but only managed to gurgle before blood spurted across Nathan's sleeve. Nathan took a quick step, back to avoid the spray, then withdrew the dagger cleanly. There was no hesitation. In the space of a heartbeat, Nathan drew 2 small swords and with precise, fluid arcs, slit the throats of the 2 dazed ninjas still under his mental hold. Crimson ribbons fanned out, and the sounds of their collapse echoed against the rocky walls. Silence fell immediately. 3 bodies lay crumpled in the dust. Nathan paused, caught his breath, then melted back into the shadows, his presence as elusive as a passing wind. The danger was over, at least for now. Nathan peered ahead and saw Hinata Crimson and the others locked in a brutal firefight. Dozens of rock ninja had them pinned in a narrow corridor, leaving no room to maneuver. Their situation looked grim. Off to one side, Nara and Yamanaka Jonin were likewise under siege, struggling to hold their ground. Further down the passage, Minato Namikaze had broken free, chasing Kuroki Ichiteng and his escort of rock ninja guards. That flank didn't concern Nathan. The pace and skill of the Yellow Flash should be more than enough to finish off Kuroki. No, the real danger lay here, among the mid- and lower-ranked Jonin coordinating this assault. The mission wasn't simply to kill Kuroki Ichiteng. True, removing the enemy's leader would cripple their morale, but it wouldn't collapse their command structure. To shatter the Rock Ninja's ability to regroup, Nathan knew they had to eliminate every decision-maker on the field. Only by cutting down this cadre of Jonin could they ensure the entire operation fell apart, and only then would victory be within reach. Only by plunging the Iwagakure forces into disarray could the rock ninjas be neutralized quickly. Otherwise, all that would happen was the swapping of one commander for another. With that in mind, Nathan didn't hesitate. He activated his instant body technique, darting through the melee with blinding speed until he found himself in the heart of the battle ring, where the Nara and Yamanaka Jonin were locked in combat against more than 20 rock ninjas under several high-ranking Iwagakure officers. The rock ninjas recoiled at Nathan's sudden arrival. Their fear deepened when they caught sight of Sho's motionless body lying at the edge of the ring. Yet Nathan paid them no heed. Instead of confronting the Jonin leaders directly, he turned on the lesser-trained soldiers, a swarm of irritating flies he could not afford to ignore later. With his katana flashing, he struck from the center of their formation, cutting down the foot soldiers in swift, precise arcs. In moments, they lay scattered and defeated, and Nathan stood ready to face the true threat, the Iwagakure Jonin titans looming just beyond the fallen. The Nara and Yamanaka Jonin exchanged a knowing look and sprang into action, rushing to Nathan's side to blunt the assault of the Iwagakure forces. Though these enemy shinobi carried the rank of Jonin, and several were even classified as elite, they proved ill-prepared for the Nara's shadow puppetry and the Yamanaka's telepathic warfare. As a result, they could not prevent Nathan from cutting down their subordinates in a single, merciless sweep. Surrounded by nearly 20 opponents, Nathan tapped into the Sharingan's uncanny perception and moved with chilling precision. In his hand, the dagger became the Reaper's sickle. Every swing found its mark. Every target dropped without so much as a whimper. Below him, the Chunin and lower-ranked Iwagakure shinobi froze in horror. They flailed in desperation, ducking, dodging, striking, but no matter how frantically they fought, the outcome was inevitable. His technique, the so-called illusion sword technique, left them with no defense. They might have tried to avert their gaze and ignore the flicker of his eyes, but they could not avoid the blade. In that instant, Nathan's slaughter was total. Whenever an opponent becomes aware of his presence, Nathan channels the power of his illusion Sharingan into his blade, then strikes with a seamless sword technique. The target is immediately ensnared by the illusion, trapped in a nightmarish vision with no escape, left to await death in obedient silence. Chapter 229, Rising Intensity. Time crawled by, each second heavy with anticipation. Nathan moved like a specter through the field of battle, his blade flashing as he cut down every mid- and lower-ranked ninja from Iwagakure in his path. The moment Iwagakure's Jonin attempted to intervene, shinobi of the Nara and Yamanaka clans intercepted them, holding them back with unwavering resolve. In under 3 minutes, Nathan had achieved his objective. Every nearby lower-ranking ninja lay dead or dying at his feet. He paused long enough to flick the blood from his short sword, then surveyed the surviving Iwagakure Jonin. His relentless slaughter had filled him with a cold, murderous aura. Beneath his steely gaze, the enemy warriors felt their hearts pound in their chests. "Finish them," Nathan murmured, voice low and deadly. With that single word, he was gone, reappearing behind one of the Jonin. The tip of his short sword slid forward, aiming for the man's vulnerable spine. Instinctively, another Jonin lunged forward, kunai raised in a desperate attempt to shield his comrade. But before he could intervene, a living shadow slithered up the Jonin's legs, eerie and silent. It coiled around him like a venomous serpent, constricting tight with uncanny strength. The Jonin froze, eyes wide with terror, as the shadow's binding force halted him mid-block and left him helpless against Nathan's lethal strike. Nathan had no choice but to shout, "Wu, watch out!" Wu Qiguang's instincts kicked in the moment he saw Nathan's dagger swing in from behind. Thanks to the warning, he reacted even faster than before. Just as the blade was about to bite into him, he activated his substitute technique. In a blur, he vanished and reappeared several feet away, leaving only a small rock in his original spot. Clang! The dagger embedded itself in the stone. Using the recoil, Nathan spun his wrist and sent the blade arcing toward the Iwagakure Jonin, who was still bound by the shadow sealing technique. But Wu Qiguang, now at a safe distance, hurled a kunai straight for Nathan's neck. Nathan's eyes flicked to the missile's flight path. He twisted his body at the last second, the kunai whizzing harmlessly past. His own follow-up strike however, lost some of its precision in the evasion. The short sword carved through the Jonin's forearm, leaving a deep, bleeding scar, but fell short of delivering a killing blow. Nathan grunted as the Iwakure Jonin, fierce eyes glowing, let out a roar and shattered the shadow-binding jutsu that had pinned him. A moment later, a Nara clan Jonin nearest to them stumbled back 2 paces, unsettled by the display of raw power. Nathan didn't pause for breath. His first strike had missed its fatal mark, so he drew his second blade in a single fluid motion and lunged at the Iwagakure shinobi's throat. Sensing the imminent threat, the Iwagakure Jonin fell back, spinning to take cover beside his ally Wuchiguang. Together they formed a solid front, one anchoring to the left, the other to the right, cutting off Nathan's advance. Undeterred, Nathan planted his foot firmly on the dirt, coiled like a cat, then sprang forward again with explosive force. His blades sang against theirs in a cascade of sparks and steel, each strike driving deeper into the narrow pocket they'd carved out. As Nathan engaged the 2 Jonin head-on, the senior ninjas of the Nara and Yamanaka clans, freed from their earlier entanglement with Iwakure's lower-ranked shinobi, suddenly seized the initiative. With Nathan drawing the enemy's attention, they pressed forward aggressively, their confidence renewed. It was then Nathan realized that by first dispatching the mid-level Iwagakure operatives swarming around him, he'd unwittingly cleared the path to confront the 2 Jonin directly, and given his allies the opening they desperately needed. The moment the last of the lower-rank Iwagakure shinobi fell, everything changed. With no more concern for collateral damage, the veteran ninjas on the field unleashed their most devastating techniques. One by one, Utsu erupted around them, fireballs roared down the corridor, rock projectiles shattered the floor, and shockwaves rattled the massive domed ceiling overhead. The entire underground chamber trembled, spiderweb cracks snaked up the walls and across the vaulted roof, threatening to collapse at any second. Yet neither side gave ground. The battle's ferocity only intensified. Nathan pressed forward, his Sharingan blazing. He watched as Wuchiguang, a seasoned Iwagakure operative, raised a hand to cast another deadly jutsu. In that instant, Nathan struck. With the seamless grace of a master, he wove the eye technique's subtle illusions into reality, ensnaring Wu's mind in an inescapable genjutsu. The world around the veteran shinobi warped and twisted. He staggered, disoriented. A strangled groan slipped past Wu's lips as Nathan lunged, blade flashing. Steel met flesh. Wuchiguang cried out, a single desperate sound that pierced both illusion and stone. Nagging pain thundered through his chest, shattering the genjutsu like glass. His knees buckled, and his hand flew to the wound, warm blood soaking his fingers. Blinking, he shook his head, striving for clarity. When the world finally righted itself, he saw Nathan standing over him. The corridor's dying echoes and the fresh ruin of the domed roof framed the younger shinobi's determined face. It was in that moment, his vision blurred, life ebbing away, that Wuchiguang understood the depth of his defeat. A cold despair settled in his heart as he realized he was utterly at Nathan's mercy. Nathan was almost upon him when Wuchiguang swallowed back a spurt of blood, fought through the pain, and stretched out his hand to grip the dagger protruding from his own chest. The Iwagakure Jonin, who'd fought alongside Wuchiguang against Nathan, felt no sympathy. With a cold sneer, he wove his fingers into seals and called forth lightning release, Thunder Dragon. Instantly, the air crackled as a serpentine bolt of lightning sprang from his palms, hurtling straight for Nathan at dizzying speed. Sensing the deadly threat behind him, Nathan yanked the dagger free from Wuchiguang's wound and flung it aside. Without breaking stride, he leaped to the right and bolted forward. "Humph, you think you can escape?" the Jonin taunted, maintaining the electrified dragon in hot pursuit. Nathan pressed his back against the side wall, channeling chakra into the soles of his feet to surge ahead, but the relentless thunder dragon stayed on his tail, crackling with lethal intent. Nathan's eyes narrowed to icy slits as he snapped into hand seals. Before the summoned thunder dragon could strike, he unleashed his ninjutsu, wind style, Wind Blade. A razor-sharp, transparent blade of wind leaped from his palm, slicing cleanly through the roaring dragon and cleaving it in two. Wind nature chakra held the clear advantage over lightning, and Nathan's Windblade was every bit as refined and more powerful than the Iwagakure Jonin's Thunder Dragon. Yet at such close range, the backlash was inevitable. As the dragon shattered around him, a blinding flash of white light erupted, followed by the sizzling crack of raw electricity. Nathan's hair stood on end as the jagged currents tore through his body, paralyzing his nerves and locking his limbs in place. He froze, utterly immobilized. "Perfect!" the Iwagakure Jonin snarled, seizing the moment. From his belt, he produced a kunai rigged with a detonating tag. With a swift, practiced motion, he let it fly toward the helpless Nathan. Nathan's eyes flared with the swirling Magatama pattern as he tracked the kunai in midair and the explosive tag tied to its handle. In an instant, he released all his chakra. A wave of pressure thundered outward, shattering the electric currents that held him and warping the very air around him. Planting both feet firmly, he vanished from sight. Clang! The kunai buried itself in the corridor floor. The detonator tag erupted in flame, sending a shockwave roaring down the hallway in both directions. Through the smoke and dust came a sickening IP of flesh. When the haze cleared, Nathan stood behind the Iwagakure Jonin, the blade of a second kunai driven deep into the man's back. The Jonin coughed up a mouthful of blood, spinning around to face him. All he saw was Nathan's half-shadowed, expressionless visage. "You," the words died on his lips. Nathan took a single deliberate step forward, chakra still humming at his fingertips, and watched the Jonin's breath catch in his throat. The corridor fell silent, except for the settling dust, and the faint drip of the Jonin's lifeblood on cold stone. Nathan summoned the last of his strength and wrenched the kunai from his side. Blood poured from the wound in a crimson torrent. He staggered forward a few steps before his legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Chapter 230. Escape Bang! The enemy's body collapsed to the ground. Nathan's face remained impassive as he swirled the kunai in his hand, crimson droplets splattering across the dirt. With a measured motion, he sheathed the blade and strode toward Wu Qiguang, drawing a short sword and holding it poised before his chest. For a long moment, the shinobi on both sides stood frozen, still reeling from the overwhelming surge of chakra Nathan had just unleashed. Gradually, the Konoha warriors shook themselves free of surprise. Seeing such formidable power among their ranks, their confidence soared. They believed the mission's success was now all but certain. The Rock Village ninjas, by contrast, felt their morale plummet. They had done everything they could to gauge Nathan's strength, yet even their most generous estimates had fallen short. To witness a chakra reserve of that size, rare even among elite jonin, was deeply discouraging. After all, while raw chakra doesn't guarantee skill, it is the bedrock on which true power is built. And Nathan possessed it in abundance. Silence settled over the battlefield as Nathan stood, short sword at the ready, eyes fixed on the next threat. No one dared challenge him again. Several Iwagakure Jonin stood in stunned silence, staring first at Sho's corpse down the corridor and then at the two comrades Nathan had just slain. Clearly, they'd underestimated their opponent's strength. Exchanging a few quick, wordless glances, the Iwagakure shinobi sprang into action. In a single fluid motion, they shattered the defensive formations of the Nara and Yamanaka Jonin, who'd been trying to block their path, and then broke away from the skirmish. Simultaneously, they activated the body flicker technique and darted off toward the far end of the underground corridor. Nathan recognized that route. It led straight back to the entrance and exit of this subterranean complex. Of course, they wanted to make a run for it. After all, he'd already proven himself more than a match for their comrades. But he wasn't about to let them slip away so easily. He watched them vanish around the bend, readying himself to give chase, while the Nara and Yamanaka Jonin, rallying once more, rushed to cut off the retreat. The chase was on. One of them vanished into the shadows beneath his feet, unleashing the shadow gathering technique. In an instant, the darkness sprouted dozens of sinuous tendrils that whipped forward and seized the fleeing Iwagakure Jonin like helpless prey. The other man formed a rapid succession of hand seals and invoked the heart-turning art, channeling all his chakra into a single searing beam. It struck one of the trapped Jonin square in the chest. Under the jolt of the mind-warping jutsu, that Jonin went rigid. With glazed eyes, he withdrew a kunai and before anyone could stop him, drove it into the chest of the man beside him. The victim twisted just in time to keep the blade from piercing his heart, but the metal still gouged a deep, bloody scar across his chest. Blood spurted free, instantly soaking his tunic. Ah! Fujita Eita cried out, clutching at the new wound as pain flared through him. His gaze snapped to the jonin who had struck him, and then to the other attacker standing calmly in the shadow. Guangshu, what are you doing? Kusaka Guangshu said nothing. He simply drew a second kunai and lunged at Eita again. This time, Eita was ready. He rolled aside and let the blade sail past harmlessly. But as he regained his footing, a cold dread settled over him. This was no ordinary battle. It was betrayal. Nathan stared into Kusaka Mitsuki's eyes, searching for the familiar spark he'd known so well, but it was gone. Instead, Mitsuki regarded him with the blank, unseeing gaze of a stranger. What on earth was happening? Confusion flickered across Nathan's mind. Then his gaze dropped to the corridor behind him, where the Yamanaka clan elder leaned against the wall, head bowed as if in a deep sleep. Of course, everything clicked into place. During their earlier clash, Nathan had recognized the elder's reasons from subtle telltale movements. No surprise, given the Yamanaka clan's storied mastery of mind-based jutsu. Now watching Mitsuki's oddly vacant expression, and seeing the elder's motionless posture, Nathan realized the truth. Mitsuki wasn't acting of her own will. She was being manipulated by the Yamanaka clan's secret mind control technique. The elder was pulling the strings, turning Mitsuki into a puppet. And Nathan knew that if he didn't act quickly, the consequences could be disastrous. Because the target was a high-level shinobi, the senior Yamanaka chose the riskiest approach. Rather than using the safer heart-turning clone technique, he poured every ounce of his spiritual energy into the original mind-body possession jutsu. Within an instant, Kusaka Koji's spirit was overwhelmed, and the Yamanaka's consciousness surged into Koji's body. He only dared attempt such a reckless maneuver because no other foes were nearby, and because Nathan was just out of earshot. After all, letting your true mind lapse to sleep in the heart of battle is a gamble few would take. Damn it. Fujita Eita ground his teeth as he watched Koji, really the Yamanaka's pawn, charge forward without a second thought for his own safety. Eita seethed at the blatant sacrifice of his friend's body, but he dared not strike a killing blow. He and Koji had fought side by side too long, and Eita knew this mind-snatching technique wouldn't hold forever. As soon as the spirit possession time limit expired, Koji's consciousness would snap back, reclaiming his body and returning to the fight as Eita's ally. All Eita could do now was stall, keep the imposter occupied until Koji reemerged. Shielding Nathan and buying those precious moments. Then, once Koji was back in control, they would turn the tables on their enemy. Despite showing mercy to Kusaka Mitsuki, Nathan knew that sparing her life didn't guarantee his own safety. Mitsuki might still turn on him the moment her chance came. Meanwhile, the Yamanaka clan jonin occupying the puppet body could never unleash her full strength because of the barrier between them, but she had one advantage. She felt no fear. Though clearly outmatched by Fujita Eita, her utter disregard for self-preservation was enough to keep him on the defensive. That hesitation was all Nathan needed. Ignoring the three Iwagakure jonin ensnared by the shadow tendrils, he sprang at Fujita Eita. Nixia Guangshu recognized the threat and immediately intensified her onslaught, but Nathan struck in tandem with her assault. In an instant, Fujita Eita's chakra pressure spiked, and he unleashed a punishing counterattack upon the two of them. Gifted as he was, undoubtedly stronger than the average jonin, his limits were clear. Even alone, Nathan believed he could overpower him. Nathan wasn't alone in the fight. He had Hikari Hisaka at his back, a warrior utterly unafraid of death, even though she'd been badly wounded earlier and was still below full strength. With her fearless support, facing Fujita Eita became almost straightforward. In less than 2 minutes, Nathan spotted his chance. He lunged and drove his dagger into Eita's blind side. The blade flashed in a fierce arc. By the time Eita registered the attack, he could only twist enough to save his heart. Still, the dagger gouged a deep, bone-bare wound along his left flank. A low groan escaped Fujita Eita as he staggered backward. Mitsuki Kushida's eyes lit up at the sight. With a fierce cry, she sprang forward and thrust her kunai into his chest. "How hateful!" she hissed. Ada snarled and scrambled to dodge, and found himself face to face with Hikaru Kusaka, sword raised for a follow-through strike. In that frantic sidestep, the kunai from Kushida ground deeper into his torso. A chill ran through him as heat blossomed around the blade. He cast a glance downward and saw a dark rivulet of blood seeping through his shirt. Nathan didn't hesitate. In the next instant, a razor-sharp arc of wind lashed out, shredding Fujita Ada's clothes and gouging a clean diagonal scar into the wall. Beside him, Fujita's eyes went wide. "This is," he gasped, but the wind blade had already struck true, splitting him in two along a vivid ribbon of blood. Though still clinging to life for a heartbeat longer, he barely had time to register his own destruction before a whistling kunai, its blade spattered scarlet, slammed into his chest. With that final merciless strike, his struggle ended. Chapter 231, Mission Complete. Nathan's decision to learn Hideji Ohara's wind style, Wind Blade, had proven its worth. The technique excelled at delivering a silent but devastating finish, perfect for turning the tide of battle without warning. Spotting an opening, Nathan summoned a razor-thin torrent of wind and sent it hurtling into Fujita Ada's chest. Within seconds, Fujita collapsed, a final, stunned gasp escaping his lips. Nearby, Kusaka Koki halted mid-stride. He gave Nathan a curt nod of respect, then spun to join the fight elsewhere. But he barely took 2 steps before he froze again. His face drained of color, his eyes darted wildly, as though 2 minds were warring for control of his body. Nathan exhaled sharply. He recognized the telltale signs of the Yamanaka clan's secret mind-transferring technique. Normally, a Yamanaka operatives possessed a lower-ranking shinobi to maintain long-term covert surveillance. But this time, the senior Yamanaka had overreached, forcing entry into a jonin of equal rank. Now their wills clashed, each striving to dominate Kusaka's consciousness. Nathan's heart pounded. He had no time to hesitate. If the Yamanaka mind snatched full control, Kusaka would become an enemy on the field, unpredictable and dangerous. Drawing a steadying breath, Nathan readied himself for the next move. The mission might be declared complete, but the battle for Kusaka Koki's soul had only just begun. Nathan had poured every ounce of his spiritual energy into suppressing the body's original soul, yet the ferocity of the fight had been enough to awaken it. The real culprit wasn't a flaw in his sealing technique, but the severity of the wounds this vessel had already sustained. Those injuries ignited the dormant spirit's survival instinct, and before long, Nathan felt the familiar tug of another consciousness clawing its way back. He forced himself to recall exactly where the damage had come from. His duel with Fujita Ada had ended in under 2 minutes, but not without cost. At the start of that skirmish, Kusaka Mitsuki, acting under orders from the Yamanaka clan's jonin, intentionally refused to defend, drawing Ada's blows to give Nathan the opening he needed. Mitsuki's selfless gambit had secured victory, but left the body battered and bruised. Had it truly been Mitsuki alone in control, those injuries would have immobilized him. Now, however, the jonin's puppeteering seemed to be unraveling. Nathan weighed his options. Should he destroy the original spirit before it fully resurfaced? The question was still hanging in the air when, almost in slow motion, he noticed Mitsuki's wounded hand slipping into his ninja pouch. He withdrew a single explosive talisman and pressed it squarely to Nathan's chest. The instant the paper touched skin, Mitsuki's face went pale with horror, and Nathan braced himself for the inevitable detonation. Nathan's fingers scrabbled at his chest, desperate to rip away the explosive talisman. But his hands seemed to have a will of their own, one pulling this way, the other that, locking him in a fatal tug-of-war. In that moment of hesitation, the talisman's seals shattered. At the same instant, the Yamanaka clan elder unleashed his ninjutsu, snapping Kusaka Mitsuki's drifting spirit back into his body. No! Mitsuki's anguished roar echoed before flame and force consumed him. The blast thundered through the clearing, hurling his body like a torn sack. When the smoke cleared, all that remained at Nathan's feet was a shattered husk. The detonating talisman had gone off at point-blank range, ending Mitsuki's life in an instant. Nathan stared down at the broken shell of the man who'd been forced to betray his comrades and, in his final act of desperation, had taken his own life. If he'd been in Mitsuki's place, Nathan thought, he wouldn't have found such a merciful end. Nathan banished the lingering thought of the Pure Land technique. Once it activates, his mind would go silent, and he'd lose the very fear of his enemy's madness, and shook his head to clear it away. He glanced at the Amanaka clan ninja who had been slumped against the wall. Just as he expected, the scout's eyes snapped open. Nathan gave him no further thought. Instead, he surged forward toward the 3 Iwagakure shinobi ensnared by his shadow tentacles. If he could kill them, their side of the mission would be complete. All that remained was for Minato Namikaze to eliminate Kuroki Ito and secure their decapitation operation. But time was against them. Reinforcements from Iwagakure would surely arrive any moment. Nathan needed to finish this and leave before they were overwhelmed. A series of distant clangs echoed through the corridor as steel met steel. The 3 trapped shinobi strained and flailed, their breathing ragged. Under Nathan's unrelenting pressure, they began to lose coordination, each step, each block growing more hesitant. Meanwhile, the Yamanaka ninja in the background unleashed subtle psychic probes, sowing further confusion. Nathan's lips curved into a cold smirk. Disoriented and panicked, the 3 Iwanin could no longer track one another's movements. With a swift movement of his hand, the shadow tentacles tightened and then snapped inward, delivering the lethal blows that would end them. As the last shinobi fell, Nathan stepped back, his eyes already scanning for the next threat. The mission's first phase was complete. Now, all that remained was to rendezvous with Minato and escape before more enemy forces arrived. Nathan's blade found its mark before the enemy even knew what had struck him. A Geni Jonin stumbled, blood blossoming on his black armor, and collapsed. Seizing the moment, Nathan drove his kunai deep into the man's back. The Jonin choked out a gurgled curse, spat crimson onto the earth, then went still. Without hesitation, Nathan withdrew his short sword and ended the fight. He wheeled toward the 2 Iwagakure Jonin who remained. In a matter of minutes, it was over. One shinobi fell to Nathan's wind blade. Half his skull cleaved apart in a single devastating arc. The other was already pinned, every inch of him locked in place by sharpened shadows summoned through the Nara clan's shadow seam technique. Their mission complete, Nathan exhaled sharply, just in time to hear the thunder of approaching footsteps. Hyuga Feihong burst into view, blood streaking her white robes. She skidded to a halt before them, panting out, "Reinforcements are on their way." At her warning, the Yamanaka Jonin closed his eyes and began to weave his hand signs, preparing to sense the enemy's advance. Their scout's eyes snapped open again. He nodded toward Nathan and the Nara clan's Jonin and reported, "There really is a large force approaching from this direction." Nathan let out a quiet breath of relief and motioned for Hinata Feihong to step forward. "Use your Byakugan. Find Jonin Minato's position." Without hesitation, Hinata activated her Byakugan and swept the surrounding terrain for Namikaze Minato's chakra signature. A few seconds later, her voice carried a note of excitement. "I found him." "What is it?" Nathan asked, his pulse quickening. He and the other Jonin tensed, bracing for enemies. Instead, Hinata smiled. "Jonin Minato is heading this way." "Good," Nathan said immediately. "Scarlet, you take point. Lead us toward him at once." "Understood." Hinata Feihong acknowledged the order and prepared to move. At the last moment, Nathan called out, "Where are Noda Daharu and Murakami Hara Sora?" They were his 2 special Jonin subordinates, masters of stealth and assassination, assigned to this mission. Hinata Crimson's footsteps faltered. "They're dead," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan frowned. "Is that so?" He let the silence stretch. He'd already steeled himself for heavy losses. He'd even been prepared to lose all 3 of their Jonin escorts. Those 3 had borne the brunt of the enemy's high-level fighters, while a swarm of rock ninjas closed in on Hinata's position. As mid-tier Jonin, their odds of survival were slim once they were besieged. Yet against all expectations, Hinata had made it through. Nathan didn't press her on how the weakest member of the squad had escaped unscathed. Sometimes, luck was enough. With that settled, Hinata sprang into motion, signaling for Nathan and the others to follow. Wordlessly, their small team pressed onward through the shattered battlefield, every step carrying them deeper into the fray. Chapter 232, The Rupture. Nathan pounded down the narrow corridor, Hinata Feihong leading the way. He and his three companions wove through the twisting underground passages, closing in on Minato Namikaze's location. Suddenly, Hinata came to an abrupt stop. Nathan skidded to a halt beside her. "What's wrong?" he whispered. Before she could answer, the ground shuddered violently. Nathan channeled chakra into his feet to steady himself as the tunnel groaned and cracked. Lines of fractured stone spiderwebbed across the walls and dome, shaking with the force of a miniature earthquake, far more intense than anything their earlier clash could have caused. When the tremors finally died away, Hinata's voice was taut with urgency. "Someone above is using an earth escape ninjutsu. They're ripping the ground apart, trying to break through from above." Nathan's communicator crackled to life. "4 enemy squads are breaching this underground chamber through the fissures," Hinata Feihong reported without looking back. She paused mid-stride and added, "One of those squads is directly in our path." Nathan frowned. "Can we slip around them?" Hinata glanced over her shoulder, scanning the rocky walls. "No, there are rock ninjas posted elsewhere too. They've got at least a rough fix on our location." Nathan considered for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Don't deviate. Stick to the original route and lead us through. We'll deal with that squad." "Understood." Hinata picked up her pace and dashed deeper into the tunnels. Nathan and the 2 shinobi flanking him followed without hesitation. Behind them, a senior Yamanaka clansman struggled to probe the twisting caverns for Minato Namikaze's chakra signature. If he managed to pinpoint Minato's exact whereabouts, he could establish a telepathic link using the mind transmission technique. But the crush of jagged stone and echoing passages made chakra detection unreliable. Cautiously, he advanced one careful step at a time. Minutes crawled by in tense silence. Then, around a bend in the tunnel, Nathan and his companions came face to face with the very rock ninja squad Hinata had warned them about. Their moment of reckoning was at hand. Nathan didn't waste a word. He formed the hand seals in an instant and unleashed his ninjutsu, fire style, dragon flame technique. In the cramped corridor, he leaned forward and roared, sending a massive, winding fire dragon barreling toward the rock ninjas ahead of him. "Quick, use water style," one shouted. "It's too late, run," another cried. Screams of agony echoed as the blazing dragon struck before they could react, ripping through the line in a single, searing sweep. Nathan wasn't satisfied with just that. With a swift motion, he plunged his hand into his ninja pouch and drew several kunai, each one wrapped in an explosive talisman. His Sharingan's Magatama spun rapidly as he tracked the few survivors. Then, in a blur, he launched the kunai in a deadly volley. "Ah!" Their screams cut off abruptly, replaced by the thunderous echoes of tag detonations. The narrow passage shuddered under the blast. When the smoke cleared, an oppressive silence settled over the carnage. Nathan's assault had left no enemy standing. In a fight like this, survival seemed impossible. It might sound extreme, but no mid- or low-rank shinobi stood a chance. "Move out," Nathan ordered, his voice calm but resolute. Hinata Feihong swallowed, nodded, and sprang forward, Nathan and the others close on her heels. The dozen or so enemies Hinata had just seen weren't even the entire search party, just the first wave. More squads came at them in quick succession, but each time Nathan, flanked by veteran shinobi from the Nara and Yamanaka clans, cut them down with thunderous precision. Still, the enemy managed to pinpoint their location and was steadily tightening the encirclement. It didn't matter. They'd already made contact with Minato Namikaze, and the 2 forces would link up any moment now. Less than 10 seconds after rounding a bend, Nathan and his foe, or companions, spotted him, Minato racing toward them, unfazed and unmarked by battle. His robes were as clean as when he'd first arrived, a clear sign that neither Kuroki Yiteng nor the Iwagakure shinobi had managed to slow him down. Nathan had managed to hold them off for so long only because he knew this terrain inside and out, and he'd used that knowledge to slip away repeatedly. In truth, Kuroki Yeteng's dramatic charge at Minato Namikaze at the start had been nothing more than theater, a way to rally his troops. The moment the real fight broke out, he quietly signaled to the nearby shinobi from Iwagakure to engage him, then fall back while he slipped away. Unfortunately, for those Iwagakure ninja, Minato's speed and skill were overwhelming. They couldn't land a single blow, nor could they outrun him. One by one, They fell in a deserted corner of the field, so remote that no one even noticed their bodies afterward. Once he'd finished them off, Minato retraced his steps, ready to begin the final phase of his mission, guiding their allies to safety. Initially, he'd hesitated to distribute his special kunai, the ones imbued with the Flying Thunder God technique, to more than a handful of trusted comrades. Not because he was stingy, or because those kunai were hard to produce. Minato could create them at will, but simply because he wasn't yet certain who would survive the coming battles. Nathan kept his methods under the strictest confidence. The Flying Thunder God technique wasn't merely his signature fighting style. It was a forbidden art recorded in the sealed scroll, never to be disclosed. He refused to entrust anyone with the slightest clue, and after every skirmish he painstakingly retrieved each special teleportation kunai. Although he doubted anyone could reverse engineer the technique, he feared the worst. If the combined resources of the 5 great ninja villages ever got hold of even one kunai, they might still devise a countermeasure. That would be catastrophic. So on this mission, he issued only the single teleportation kunai he needed to mark his departure point, and then recovered it as soon as he reappeared. With no kunai left in his team's hands, any pursuer would be limited to ordinary tracking methods, unless Nathan elected to plant subtle locator seals on his comrades in advance. Even if Nathan and the others trusted him, they would never agree to have their lives dictated by someone else. Minato Namikaze didn't even mention it, nor would he have tried to pull it off in secret. That simply went against his nature. Fortunately, the outcome hadn't been too disastrous. Not long after the battle ended, as he retraced his steps along the old path, Nathan and the others appeared before him. Chapter 283, Evacuation. Minato Namikaze scanned the formation before him and noticed 2 empty spots in Nathan's squad. He had his suspicions, but still asked, "What happened to Oharu and Harasora?" "Nobody survived," Nathan replied quietly. Minato's shoulders sagged as he exhaled. "I see. And the mission, how did it go?" One of the Nara clan jonin stepped forward. "All designated targets have been neutralized." Minato raised an eyebrow. "Every single one." The jonin gave a crisp nod. "Yes, Lord Forth, and the credit goes entirely to Nathan." Minato turned his gaze to the young shinobi. He knew Nathan by reputation, Ghost Sword, and had heard stories of his past achievements. Yet over the last few days, Nathan had devoted himself to rigorous physical training and strict chakra conservation. He'd avoided direct duels with Iwagakure's elite, leaving his true potential unseen on the battlefield. Minato studied him, suddenly curious about the depths of Nathan's strength. Minato Namikaze had always approached Nathan's reputation with cautious skepticism. After all, anyone who spent so much time on the remote western mountain tended to attract inflated rumors. Not that Minato looked down on him. Every shinobi learned early the value of doubting unverified strength, but watching Nathan in action had thoroughly dispelled his misgivings. The young man's skill far outstripped the gossip. No wonder Nara Tsurugi had pressed so hard for his inclusion. Shaking off his thoughts, Minato turned to the group of 4. "Nathan, Nozomi, hold your positions here. I'll be back shortly after I send Hinata and Qingfeng home." With that, he drew a specially marked kunai and slotted it into the stone wall behind them. Nathan and Yamanaka Nozomi exchanged a quick nod of understanding. Without another word, Minato placed one hand on Hinata Crimson's shoulder and the other on Nara Qingfeng's. He formed the seals, activated the Flying Thunder God technique, and in a blink, the 3 of them vanished. Nathan strained every fiber of his chakra sensing, but there was no sign of their departure. In the sudden silence, he realized just how seamless and untraceable Minato's teleportation truly was. Nathan's heart sank as Minato Namikaze and the others vanished into thin air before his eyes. He muttered to himself, "My spatial perception really isn't all that." After all, mastering the Flying Thunder God technique depended on extraordinary spatial awareness, and if his senses weren't sharp enough, he might never even get off the ground. All he could do was hope that the proficiency panel's bonus would carry him through this hurdle. Otherwise, he'd be in serious trouble. "No, when I attempt teleportation, I have to clear my mind completely," he resolved. "If I can let go of conscious perception, maybe I'll actually learn something." Before he could dwell on it further, Minato reappeared beside the throwing knife lodged in the wall. Nathan couldn't help a pang of envy. If only he had Minato's ability, he could accomplish so much more. "All right," Minato said, gently retrieving the kunai and slipping it into his ninja pouch. He turned to Nathan and Yamanaka Nozomi. "It's your turn." Nathan and Nozomi exchanged a determined look and nodded in unison. Minato stepped up behind them and placed a reassuring hand on each of their shoulders. "Remember," he instructed softly, "focus on me, and then let go of everything else." Nathan took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and tried with all his might to clear his mind. Beside him, Nozomi did the same. In the next instant, the world dissolved around them, and they vanished. Minato Namikaze's voice came softly at Nathan's ear. "Relax. Don't let your nerves get the better of you." Nathan gave a small nod and forced himself to unclench his muscles. He wasn't used to someone, especially someone as powerful as Minato, standing so close behind him. Still, if he wanted to leave safely, he had to endure it. No sooner had he begun to calm down than Uchiha materialized at his side. In the blink of an eye, the world around them rippled, and they stood in the bustling streets of Fangliu town. Nathan stared at his surroundings in astonishment. "Wait, already?" he whispered. He'd felt no jolt, no rush of wind, nothing to signal they'd moved. Yet here they were, far from the village. He frowned, annoyed at his own obliviousness. Teleportation should register on the senses, even faintly. Then it hit him. His neural responses simply couldn't keep pace with the environment's instantaneous shift. His brain had smoothed over the transition, tricking him into believing nothing had changed. A rueful smile curved his lips. Impressive as this fast travel was, it came at the cost of feeling utterly disoriented. Shaking off the lingering dizziness, Nathan squared his shoulders. Now that they were in Fangliu town, there was no time to waste. Nathan stared at the empty space before him, the scene after Minato's teleport, feeling like the ghostly afterimage a master shinobi leaves when using the instant or substitution technique, a trick that would baffle any low-ranked ninja. And yet Nathan's Sharingan had been fully active the entire time, granting him reflexes far beyond those of an average jonin. Even so, in the split second after Minato vanished and reappeared, Nathan had caught sight of Uchiha standing there, if only for a heartbeat. Undeniable proof that his nervous system had faltered, unable to adjust to the sudden shift in his surroundings. But Namikaze Minato could not possibly suffer the same weakness, or he'd never attempt to fight using the Flying Thunder God technique. In a duel between masters, even the slightest hesitation is a critical flaw. And Minato displayed none. It meant Minato's neural response was faster, far faster, than Nathan's, despite the latter's 3-Tomo Sharingan blazing at full power. A cold breath escaped Nathan's lips. Nathan finally grasped the true meaning of shadow-level power. With Minato Namikaze's reaction speed, even seasoned jonin would find it nearly impossible to land a single blow. Ordinary shinobi didn't stand a chance. That vast disparity makes it clear why Uchiha Itachi, wielding the Mangekyo Sharingan, could slaughter so many of his own clan. Of course, Itachi's legendary prowess was tempered by the inherent strain of the Mangekyo on a standard Sharingan user. Without that drawback, the surviving Uchiha wouldn't have stood even an inkling of a chance. As Nathan pondered this, his heart burned with anticipation. In less than a month, he too would unlock that power. With Kaji-level strength, he would finally secure his place in the ninja world and no longer worry about the whispers or judgments of others. Still, he couldn't ignore the well-known curse of the Mangekyo, progressive blindness. He didn't know yet whether his own reflection heart technique might counteract that failing. Despite these lingering doubts, Nathan felt sure of himself. He had prepared for every obstacle, and he believed his secret technique might just be the key to mastering the Mangekyo Sharingan without paying the usual price. In the days ahead, he would find out whether ambition or fate held the ultimate advantage. Compared to the others, at least Nathan had a proficiency panel to fall back on. Even if the reflection heart technique failed, he could pursue another approach. He refused to believe that, without his brother's help, his Mangekyo Sharingan couldn't still evolve into the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. "All right, we've arrived." Nathan's thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice behind him, Namikaze Minato's. Almost at once, he felt Minato's palm lift away from his shoulder. Instinctively, Nathan's body unclenched, the last of his tension melting away. Chapter 234, Aftermath. Nathan, you know medical ninjutsu, don't you? Use it on Feihong. Minato Namikaze's voice snapped back into Nathan's ears. He turned to Hinata Feihong, who sat slumped against a mossy wall only a few feet away. Her face was ashen, and dark rivulets of blood trailed down her torn uniform. She'd fought valiantly. 2 special jonin stronger than her had fallen under that relentless siege, and now she was paying the price. Before, Hinata had summoned every last ounce of strength to keep herself going. But once they'd broken free of the underground chamber, her reserves finally drained away, and her injuries began to take their toll. Nathan knelt beside her and conducted a quick survey. 3 life-threatening wounds to her chest, lower abdomen, and back. On top of that, more than a dozen smaller cuts and punctures, juiced out from kunai and shuriken, had left her dangerously weak from blood loss. The one silver lining, none of the blades had been poisoned. Now it was up to Nathan's skill with medical ninjutsu to staunch the bleeding and stabilize her before her condition grew any worse. With Nathan's current mastery of the level 7 Palm Immortal technique and level 4 Chakra Scalpel, dealing with the threat was straightforward. After he pieced together what had happened, he nodded and said with quiet confidence, "This won't be a problem." At his words, Hinata Feihong, whose consciousness had already begun to blur, finally succumbed and slipped into a coma. Watching her collapse, Nathan couldn't help but think, her will to live is astonishing. "I'll leave it in your hands then," Namikaze Minato said, breaking the silence. "Understood," Nathan replied coolly. He didn't offer any flowery humility or overly polite assurances, those weren't his style. As an Uchiha, he knew a bit of distance suited him. A touch of tsundere in his manner was practically in his blood. Beyond just preserving his pride, it kept him from standing out too much and inviting unnecessary complications. After all, bonds can grant you unexpected power, and yet they can just as easily bind you, limiting your freedom. The deeper the connection between 2 people, the tighter the bonds become, strand upon strand weaving into an unbreakable net. Nathan refused to be caught in such a trap. He kept everyone at arm's length, guarding his own heart with a practiced aloofness. Still, right now an exception had to be made. With calm precision, Nathan invoked his Chakra Scalpel technique. In the blink of an eye, shimmering blades sliced away the necrotic flesh around Hinata Feihong's abdominal wound. He gently washed the area, cleared away debris, and finally staunched the bleeding. Without hesitation, he shifted into his next skill, the Palm Immortal technique. A soft green light radiated across his right hand as he pressed it firmly against Hinata's injury. The glow seeped into the flesh, channeling pure yang escape chakra through her torn tissue. Under that divine energy, cells multiplied at an astonishing rate. Proteins and healing hormones began synthesizing almost instantly. Minutes later, Hinata's pallor softened and the color returned to her cheeks. Her vital signs stabilized before Nathan's watchful eyes, a testament to the power of his healing art. As she lay unconscious, the tension in her features slowly softened. The grimace of pain melted away, replaced by an almost peaceful calm. Minato Namikaze watched in astonishment at the bedside. He had known Nathan was talented. After all, the Chakra Scalpel he debuted earlier had already surpassed the skill of many medical ninjas in Konoha, but it wasn't enough to truly wow him. This new display, however, was on a different level altogether. Nathan's application of the Immortal Palm technique felt nothing short of miraculous. Minato realized that, at this moment, no one in the village could rival the young medic's aptitude. Exceptional strength, refined medical ninjutsu, and all at such a tender age. How could he not be impressed? Nathan's composure under pressure, the precision of his chi, acra flow, and the effortless way he calmed his patient had left a deep impression on the 4th Hokage's mind. Beside Minato, Yamanaka Shi shifted in his seat, feigning polite interest in a distant conversation. The slightest tremor in his posture, though subtle, drew Minato's attention. It was clear that Shi, too, recognized the significance of Nathan's talent. As Nathan completed the final adjustments and stepped back, the room seemed to hold its breath, everyone present now aware that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Once Minato Namikaze had fully regained his composure, he turned to Sai and asked, What happened? Sai's face grew serious. The Four-Tails Jinchuriki, Lao Zi, and the Five-Tails Jinchuriki, Han, have just appeared on the front lines. Captain Wyron has ordered you to reinforce them immediately. No sooner had Sai finished than two vast, oppressive chakra signatures surged in from beyond the village, the unmistakable auras of the Four-Tails and Five-Tails. Sensing those tailed beast energies, Minato wasted no time. He activated his Flying Thunder God technique and vanished in a flash. Sai and Nara Qingfeng exchanged a quick glance, saluted Nathan, and then sprinted out of the village toward the battlefield. It was clearly Iwagakure's retaliation for the recent strike on their headquarters. Earlier, Omura Yuito had launched a massive counterattack to support the headhunting operation, drawing the Rock Village's main forces away. Now, seizing the moment before their allies could withdraw, the Rock Shinobi aimed to annihilate them in the field, and they'd even deployed the Four-Tails and Five-Tails Jinchuriki, Lao Zi and Han, to ensure victory. If Namikaze Minato were unable to stop these two Jinchuriki, and they succeeded in killing their targets, Konoha's losses would be catastrophic. In that scenario, the Land of Iron might actually come out of the battle relatively unscathed. Yet this entire premise hinges on Minato's failure, and of course he doesn't fail. No ordinary Kage could hold back both the Four-Tails Jinchuriki and the Five-Tails Jinchuriki at once. Minato is no ordinary Kage. Thanks to his Flying Thunder God technique, he can split his efforts, teleporting instantly between Lao Zi and Han to intercept their attacks on two fronts. It's true that fighting on dual fronts burns through chakra at an enormous rate, but Minato has mastered Sage Mode, so his chakra reserves are effectively limitless. What's more, his expertise with the Flying Thunder God technique means each teleportation uses remarkably little chakra, allowing him to sustain this punishing pace indefinitely. By contrast, while Lao Zi and Han gain immense power when they partially transform, they cannot maintain even a half-tailed form for long. If they push the transformation too far or for too long, they risk losing control of their own wills to the beasts they host. When that happens, Konoha and Minato will be in far greater danger than anyone anticipates. Konoha's ninja were heavily outnumbered by those of the Hidden Rock Village, which meant the rocks were likely to suffer even more casualties. On top of that, Konoha still had Namikaze Minato, a genuine Kage-level shinobi, leading their forces. If either the Four-Tails or Five-Tails Jinchuriki lost control amid the chaos, the Hidden Rock side would seize the opportunity. With Minato on the field, however, those beasts would never be allowed to turn the tide. From the outset, the Rock's counterattack was effectively doomed. As long as Minato remained in command, the Four-Tails and Five-Tails could never realize their full power. If either village hoped to clinch victory, the decisive struggles would have to take place at the lower levels, among the so-called regular shinobi. In those engagements, effective leadership was everything. After this failed strike, the Hidden Rock Village would be forced into a period of enforced silence, reassigning commanders, reorganizing their forces, tending to the wounded. All of it would require time. By the time the night was through, Konoha would at last secure a rare moment of rest. Chapter 35. Mutation Night yielded to dawn as the bloodied battlefield fell silent. Moonlight faded before the rising sun, illuminating the broken forms of Konoha and Iwagakure shinobi who'd clashed through the hours. Both sides paid dearly for each yard of ground gained, and by first light, the carnage finally ceased. Just as Nathan had anticipated, the Iwa forces, suffering from a lack of unified command, transitioned from their usual aggressive assaults into a defensive posture. In theory, this ought to have been Konoha's moment to launch a decisive counterattack. But the previous night's relentless onslaught had already drained Konoha's ranks nearly dry. Fatigue and injuries ran rampant. Few were in any shape to fight. After a tense war council, Omura Yuito abandoned his bid for a full-scale strike. Instead, he ordered only intermittent probing attacks, allowing the bulk of his troops to rest and recover. Nathan had reckoned on at least 10.5 days of tense but quiet recuperation. Yet war's uneasy peace is always fragile, and barely a week later, that fragile calm was shattered. This afternoon, Nathan sat cross-legged in the sparse training chamber perched high on the western mountain, channeling yang chakra through his palm immortal technique. A soft hum of energy rippled beneath his skin as he refined his body's defenses. A sudden knock rattled the simple wooden door. Dong dong dong! Nathan's eyes snapped open. Irritated, he called out, "Come in." The door swung inward to reveal a breathless Konoha Chunin. Dropping to one knee, the young shinobi gasped out, "Captain, urgent news from the valley below. Iwa shinobi have mobilized. Headquarters orders us to prepare our defenses immediately." Nathan rose, brow furrowed. "Iwa shinobi, what did they do?" "They didn't specify, sir, only that we must brace for attack," the Chunin replied, shaking his head. Nathan ran a hand through his hair and waved the report aside. "Very well. Rally the troops at once and alert the other Jonin captains. Assign defensive sectors and patrol duties." "Yes, Captain." The Chunin saluted smartly and hurried away. As commander of this remote stronghold, Nathan held overall authority, with several Jonin captains beneath him, handling routine patrols and fortifications. Tonight, however, he would personally oversee the fortress's defensive arrangements. With Iwa forces on the move, there could be no mistakes. Nathan never fussed over whether he was hunting for a chakra battery or simply sharpening his skills, and today was no different. After watching the Konoha Chunin's silhouette disappear into the distance, he waited in silence for nearly a minute. Then, as the last of his yang-released chakra faded, he snatched the dagger at his side and teleported in swift succession, reappearing atop a tall tree just below the mountain ridge. Focusing his will, Nathan activated his Sharingan. Instantly, the valley far below snapped into view. Though it couldn't rival the Byakugan's range, in this clear line of sight, the Sharingan still pierced remarkable distances. From his vantage point, he saw the Rock Village forces already drawn up in battle formation and splitting into 3 squads. One squad marched directly toward the Fengliu town fortress, clearly intent on a head-on clash with the Konoha ninja. A second turned off to the north, poised to strike at the mountain stronghold in that direction. The third squad, meanwhile, was racing down the slope in hot pursuit of the retreating Konoha Chunin. Nathan watched as the enemy force swept past the Fengliu town's stronghold, swinging in a wide arc across the southern plains before bearing down on his position. He frowned in disbelief. Weren't the Iwa ninja leadership all but wiped out a week ago? How can they be attacking exactly the way they used to? If only 1 or 2 commanders had been replaced, he could chalk it up to coincidence. But their decapitation strike had nearly annihilated Iwa's entire command structure. With such a radical turnover, tactics and battle rhythms should have shifted dramatically. Every leader brings his own methods, after all. Yet the enemy's advance mirrored the old offensive plan down to the smallest detail. It made no sense. Nathan shook his head, stepping back down to solid ground. Whatever the explanation, he would wait and see. Distant dust clouds on the horizon marked the Iwa ninja's approach. He tightened his grip on his weapon and readied himself. After all, as the old saying goes, when the tide of battle comes pouring in, you must stand firm and meet it head-on. Don't waste time trying to untangle their schemes, Nathan told himself. In the end, raw power decides everything. No matter how many tricks they pull, without real strength, they're useless. 20 minutes later, a breathless messenger arrived. Nathan's men were already locked in combat, and the enemy had split into 3 columns, advancing on the mountain summit from the left, center, and right. Nathan paused to take it all in. He barked orders to the other Jonin to shore up defenses at the center and left flank, then slipped away toward the dense forest on the right. His plan was simple. By squeezing through the trees, he could bypass the Iwa ninja's left wing and strike them from the rear. Such a surprise attack would not only throw the enemy's advance into chaos, but also give Nathan the chance to size up their true strength. But fate had other ideas, and events soon spiraled far beyond what Nathan had anticipated. Nathan had been confident that Konoha's frontline shinobi could hold out for at least a little while. He certainly didn't expect the central defense to collapse in under 5 minutes, forcing the left and right flanks to fall back for fear of being cut off by Iwagakure's forces pressing in from behind. What happened? Why did our lines crumble so fast? He wondered. Through the Yamanaka mind link, the clan's special jonin, Kiku Yamakura, answered immediately. It's the Four Tails Jinchuriki. He's slipped into the vanguard. The four tails? Nathan's pulse raced. Are you sure? Absolutely. Kiku's tone was grim. He broke our line with a massive lava-style jutsu. No one stood a chance. Nathan fell silent. After a moment, he murmured, so that was his plan all along. Kiku's report had given him the insight he needed. The new Rock Village commander intended to shatter Konoha's front, and he had the power to do it. Nathan's mind raced as he pieced together the enemy's gambit. They deliberately recycled the former squad's battle plan, first to lull their opponents into complacency, then to conceal their true objective. The moment their vigilance slipped, they'd unleashed the two hidden Jinchuriki in their ranks to storm the Twin Ridges, guarding Fenglyu Town. If Nathan's deductions were correct, the Five Tails Jinchuriki, Han, had joined the Rock Ninja unit attacking the northern stronghold, and, much like his counterpart, the Four Tails Jinchuriki, Lao Zi, may already have punched through our outer defenses. But conjecture wouldn't win this fight. The crucial question was how to stop them. Lao Zi posed a far greater threat than Han. As the Four Tails' vessel, he commanded lava release, a power that sears flesh itself, and could envelop his entire body in a lava-release chakra mode that repelled ordinary attacks entirely. Short of draining him of chakra until he collapsed, much as Hoshigaki Kisame did in a later age, there seemed no conventional way to harm him. Nathan knew they needed a new strategy, and fast, if Fenglyu Town was to be saved. Nathan happened to be highly skilled in ninjutsu, but that expertise offered him no defense against an opponent's water-release techniques, making the whole ordeal all the more exasperating. Chapter 236, Instant Kill. Captain, what are our orders? Came Yamanaka Ju's voice over the comm. Nathan paused, studying the tactical display before him. Enemy forces were massing, and his team was stretched thin. First, establish a secondary defense line, he said steadily. Organize your squads and post them at the eastern choke point. Then dispatch a runner to update Yuito Jonin on our situation. There was a hiss of static before Yamanaka Kiku's anxious voice cut in. But what about the Four Tails Jinchuriki? He's still active down there. Nathan felt his pulse quicken. Reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time, and the Four Tails was too formidable to ignore. He clenched his fist. Leave him to me, he ordered. You focus on the defenses. Do not engage the enemy until I return. Understood, Captain? Kiku exhaled sharply, relief evident in her tone, and ended the transmission. Nathan stared at the monitors, replaying the latest scans of the battlefield. Trying to kill the Four Tails outright wasn't an option, not with his current strength, and not without risking the entire operation. What he needed was a diversion, a way to buy time for his team's fallback. He gathered his gear, kunai, chakra concentrates, and a scroll containing a high-level sealing jutsu. There was no turning back. Sliding the scroll into his vest, Nathan took a final, steadying breath. Then, without another word, he vanished into the shadows, ready to confront the Four Tails alone. As soon as someone reports what's happening here, I'm certain Namikaze Minato will arrive, and he can take this headache off my hands. Nathan's motto has always been, take only the rice you can eat, and never bite off more than you can chew. Minato was sent here specifically to confront the Four Tails and Five Tails Jinchuriki, not to strut around in side skirmishes. Frankly, it's risky to make any big moves now. If duty didn't demand he stay, Nathan might have slipped away long ago. Fortunately, this gamble is manageable, and it's a small courtesy to Minato after all. With that settled, Nathan veered sharply to the left and charged toward the Iwagakure squad. He'd been looping around their flank, and now he broke through at the center of their left wing. From here, he could slice right through their formation. Confronting Lao Zi directly wasn't on his agenda, for two reasons. One, the distance was simply too great. Nathan concealed himself among the boulders, weighing his options. Charging the enemy commander head-on was suicide. Instead, he planned to scatter the rest of the Iwa shinobi into disarray. Drawing them into this rocky gauntlet would make them think twice before unleashing their petrifying jutsu. Better still, forcing the commander to send backup would create the opening he needed. Aside from that boss, none of the Iwa ninja stood a chance against him one-on-one. As long as he avoided being surrounded, he could inflict heavy casualties, and when the commander finally had to shore up his defenses, Nathan would slip through in the chaos. That approach promised a far quicker path to his real target than any wild chase. A minute later, from his vantage point halfway up the slope, Nathan spotted the Iwa squad gathering. They moved in tight ranks toward the mountain's crest, shadowed by the looming rock formations. Without a word, he drew several razor-sharp shuriken and sent them spinning into their midst. Whoosh, whoosh! The blades cut the air with lethal precision. A startled cry echoed through the ranks as an unsuspecting shinobi clutched his shoulder, bleeding onto the dusty trail. Under Nathan's silent assault, the Iwa formation wavered, and the battle was on. Nathan's plan hinged on chaos. He deliberately targeted the genin with a surprise volley of shuriken so they never had a chance to react. Each missile found its mark in an instant. Enemy attack! Watch out! There are shinobi incoming! Where are they? Only echoes answered them as panic tore through the Iwagakure team. Exactly as Nathan had predicted, but mere confusion wouldn't be enough. Once the Jonin regained their bearings and organized a defense, the uproar would die away, and that was the last thing he wanted. After loosing his shuriken, Nathan melted into the forest undergrowth, wrapped in genjutsu that masked his presence. He slipped between tree trunks, every step silent. Through his Sharingan, he zeroed in on a lone figure, a special Jonin, by the ebb and flow of his chakra. Not overwhelmingly powerful, but formidable enough to spark greater fear if struck down. Perfect for escalating the bedlam. Everyone, be quiet! Kenichi Yamamoto burst from the trembling ranks, his voice cutting through the clamor like a blade. Without waiting for a response, he drew himself up, eyes blazing, and that single gesture only ratcheted the tension higher, playing right into Nathan's hands. Next, as the dust settled, Kenichi Yamamoto was about to order his men to brace for defense when he noticed several soldiers behind him staring over their shoulders with terrified expressions. A sudden, icy knot of dread tightened in his chest. Reacting on pure instinct, Kenichi dove forward, clearing the spot where he'd been standing. Phew. A split second later, a short sword whistled past, grazing the air where his head had been. A searing sting flared at his temple, and he turned to see a clump of hair and scalp spiraling to the ground in a spray of blood. He had narrowly sidestepped death, and now his heart pounded with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Who had dared to strike from behind? Perched a few paces away, Nathan watched in surprise as his careful attack was foiled. He blinked once, then refocused with grim determination. Swiftly, Nathan raised his left hand and wove his fingers into a tight seal. His voice rang out in a sharp incantation. Fire release, fireball technique. In an instant, a massive orb of scorching flame erupted from Nathan's palm. It crackled and roared as it hurled toward Kenichi's exposed back, cutting through the air like a blazing comet. Nathan sensed danger closing in and swept his gaze over the clearing. A sturdy oak stood just ahead. Seizing the chance, he stamped off the ground and hurtled himself like a human projectile, landing silently behind the massive trunk. Not to be outdone, Kenichi Yamamoto hurled a fireball at the tree, and with a deafening crack it exploded, bright red flames licking the bark. The inferno roared to life, and smoke curled upward. Through the haze, a charred figure stumbled free from behind the smoldering trunk. Kenichi. In a single fluid motion, Nathan materialized before him, short sword raised. He slashed across Kenichi's throat with pinpoint precision, yet strangely, no blood poured out. Nathan's blade came away clean, and he froze, alarmed. At that moment, something whistled through the air. A black-steeled kunai shot past the burning tree and found its mark at Nathan's neck. Pain flared as the blade cut deep. Die! Kenichi rasped from his hiding spot, voice hoarse but triumphant. He expected his enemy to recoil in fear, to beg for mercy, but Nathan's face remained unreadable, calm, even in the face of the deadly strike. Nathan's gaze fixed on a single, chilling sight, an impassive face framed by two blood-red Sharingan. In the next instant, those eyes flooded his vision, yanking his consciousness into a bottomless void. But Nathan didn't hesitate. With a swift movement, he caught his opponent's wrist, twisted it, and drove a kunai upward into the man's chest. Ken Yamamoto snapped out of the illusion, eyes widening as he stared at the blade buried in his heart. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Seconds later, his body went limp, and the figure before Nathan dissolved into a swirl of chakra smoke. Only a shadow clone. Ken's reaction had been formidable. At the last moment, he'd relied on a cunning combination of genjutsu and counterattack, a trap that might have ensnared any less experienced shinobi. But Nathan was different. Even though the Sharingan itself cannot distinguish clones from flesh and blood, the abrupt halving of his opponent's chakra was unmistakable. Within heartbeats, he had unraveled Ken's ruse and countered before the trap could spring. Nathan seized on his opponent's own strategy and flipped it back against them in an instant. His counterattack struck like lightning, leaving the enemy reeling before they even realized what had happened. "Captain!" one of the shinobi yelled. "Captain Yamamoto!" cried another, her voice cracking with urgency. For a heartbeat, the air hung heavy with stunned silence, until the Iwagakure mid-level ninjas finally snapped out of their daze. One after another, they shouted warnings and orders, their voices echoing across the battlefield as they scrambled to regroup. Chapter 237, First Encounter. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. None of the Iwagakure genin on the field fully grasped what had transpired until Nathan's blade found Kenichi Sanmoto's heart. Only then did their horrified shouts snap through the air. In that instant, Nathan released his grip on Sanmoto's wrist and let the body slump to the ground. His eyes were rimmed with fresh blood, burning with a cold, unyielding light as he turned to face the onlookers. Silence fell so suddenly that the genin instinctively took a step back. Panic flickered in their eyes, panic that Nathan was ready to fan into a blaze. He knew time was running out. If he stoked the panic further, they'd scatter in all directions, and once chaos reigned, it would be the perfect cover for him to strike again, sowing maximum devastation among the Iwa shinobi. With each fallen head, the scale of the riot would only swell, and in the uproar, the village's defenses would collapse, achieving exactly what he intended. Nathan didn't hesitate. In the same heartbeat, he closed the distance to a nearby Chunin, barely giving the man a moment to react. Nathan triggered his Sharingan, its red tomoe flaring to life. A whisper of chakra rippled outward as he unleashed his genjutsu, snaring the Chunin's mind and bending him to Nathan's will in an instant. The first meeting had begun, and blood would be the price of entry. Nathan drew a sharp breath and sprang forward. In one fluid motion, he drove his dagger into the Iwagakure Chunin's chest. There was a soft pop as steel met flesh, and the man's eyes widened in shock. He briefly shook off Nathan's genjutsu, but it was already too late. He collapsed, dead before he hit the ground. Without pausing, Nathan yanked the blade free and swept his gaze to the next opponent. Same method, cast the illusion, then strike before they can react. Each kill took less than a second, precise, silent, and utterly merciless. Before the stunned shinobi from the stone village could even raise their weapons, Nathan was on his third target. A heartbeat later, another body crumpled at his feet. The courtyard fell deathly quiet, except for the sound of steel slicing through air and flesh. The remaining stone ninjas froze, horror etched across their faces. It was like watching livestock being butchered on an assembly line. Mechanical, efficient, terrifying. Then someone finally screamed, "Run!" As if awakening from a nightmare, the survivors scattered in all directions, stone walls echoing with the pounding of feet and ragged breaths. Nathan watched them go, dagger still slick with blood, before slipping back into the shadows. Nathan watched without immediately giving chase. His goal was chaos, not indiscriminate slaughter. So he lingered for a moment before sprinting toward the mountain's summit. He'd anticipated that most of the fleeing shinobi would take that route, and they did. A shrill scream cut through the trees behind him. The lead Iwagakure shinobi realized, too late, that another comrade had fallen. None of them dared stop or look back. Hesitation in the face of Nathan meant certain death, a truth written in the blood of those who had already tried. This enemy showed no mercy. Even when an Iwa squad encountered reinforcements, a special jonin dispatched to help, they couldn't break the massacre. That jonin had held out only a heartbeat longer than Kenichi Yamamoto before succumbing to the so-called Ghost Blade Nathan. Now they knew his name, but that knowledge only deepened their terror. Rumors of the Ghost Blade had circulated before, but few had witnessed his ruthlessness firsthand. Their fear had been theoretical, until now, when the nightmare had become all too real. Nathan's recent performance, and the way his foes had begun matching faces to names, amplified their terror. When they saw him cut down the second jonin with such ease, they abandoned all hope of fighting back and fled up the mountain. One by one, Iwagakure's shinobi joined the stampede, and chaos rippled toward the summit. By the time they reached Konoha's second line of defense, their panic had drawn the attention of Iwa's forward scouts. A single jonin arrived, halting the tide of retreating soldiers. He glared at them and barked, "What's going on? Why are you pulling back ahead of orders?" In Iwagakure's strategy, every unit, front line, rear camp, and both flanks, had a precise assignment. These men had been charged with securing every approach. Now, having all rushed forward in fear, they left their positions exposed. If the enemy seized this gap and struck their flanks, the entire force would be at risk. The Iwagakure Jonin bristled with anger. His carefully laid plan was already falling apart. From the front lines, an Iwagakure Chunin stumbled forward, fear in his eyes. "Sir, Ghost's sword is on our tail. He's cutting through our men like they're nothing. We've lost dozens already, and he isn't stopping." "Ghost's sword? You mean Uchiha Nathan?" Nagashima Tomohisa's gaze hardened. The Chunin swallowed, voice trembling. "Yes, it's him. He single-handedly took out Jonin Yamamoto and Jonin Oda." "What?" Nagashima's voice jumped an octave. "Kenichi Yamamoto and Yukima Oda, dead?" "I saw them fall with my own eyes," the Chunin confirmed, his face pale. In that moment, Nagashima realized just how dire the situation had become. He wasted no time and rushed to inform Lao Zi. This entire operation revolved around Lao Zi's strategy and judgment. Unlike under Haimu Yiteng, who had treated Lao Zi and Han as mere tools, the new commander trusted their input. Now it was up to Lao Zi to decide their next move. The new commander of the Rock Ninja had granted Lao Zi and Han expanded authority, even entrusting them with leading the team, though, to be fair, this was only a test run. On another flank, as they closed in on Konoha's second line of defense, a sudden alert forced Lao Zi to call off the charge and fall back to the rear. His expression went stone cold. "Tomohisa, what's happening? How did that so-called ghost sword drive so many of our men away?" Once they reached the staging area, Lao Zi cornered Nagashima Tomohisa. Tomohisa ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm still trying to nail down the details," he admitted. "Right now our formation's in shambles. Our rear guard and both flanks are exposed. If Konoha exploits that and encircles us, we'll be in serious trouble." "Where are the troops who retreated?" Lao Zi demanded. "I'll question them myself." Clearly dissatisfied, Lao Zi turned on his heel and strode toward the growing throng of returning soldiers. With no better option, Tomohisa flanked him and followed, eager to gather whatever fresh intel he could. As they drew near the Iwagakure squad, Nathan suddenly halted, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. He fixed his gaze on one of the shinobi and demanded, "Who are you?" The others turned to look. This Iwagakure ninja was a Chunin, but at first glance he seemed unremarkable, utterly ordinary. Yet when he spoke, even the ninjas who had defected alongside him felt the hairs on their necks rise. He offered a low chuckle. "Heh, so you've uncovered me? Impressive, you've got very sharp senses." Chapter 238, Molten Escape. Careful. At Nathan's warning, Nagashima Tomohisa let out a sharp cry and in one fluid motion drew a handful of kunai before hurling them toward the real Nathan. That voice had fooled them all. It was Nathan himself, disguised as an Iwa shinobi by means of a transformation technique. He'd slipped through the chaos, not expecting to find Lao Zi here, but the instant he saw him, he sensed an opportunity. In that moment, a flicker of murderous intent betrayed him, alerting Lao Zi to the threat and revealing Nathan's true position. Frustration surged within him. His ruse was blown. With a soft crackle, the illusion dissolved. Nathan dispelled the jutsu, reverting to his true form. Unfazed by the panicked Iwa troops ringing them, he activated his Sharingan, the scarlet tomoe blazing. Every kunai spinning toward him slowed in his perception. His body blurred as he wove between the deadly projectiles, evading each one with inhuman precision. Seizing the opening, Nathan lunged at Lao Zi. With a sharp inhale, he drew a slender dagger from his belt and thrust it straight for his target's heart. "Careful." Nagashima Tomohisa's voice rang out once more, but it was already too late. Nathan's dagger sliced through the air, aimed squarely at Lao Zi, but Lao Zi didn't even flinch. The moment the blade neared him, a dark red aura blazed around his body, exuding a suffocating, oppressive pressure. In the next instant, Laozi moved with inhuman speed, closing the gap and grasping Nathan's dagger with his bare hand. Nathan shoved with all his might, but the blade wouldn't budge. Locked in that breathless stalemate, Laozi let out a low shout. With a sudden heave of his sword arm, he flung Nathan aside. Nathan spun through the air, bracing himself mid-twirl, and landed nimbly on a broad branch of the nearest tree. From his elevated perch, he looked down at Laozi, still standing firm, his cloak swirling like the hide of a tailed beast, and clenched his jaw, recalling too well how effortlessly Laozi had caught his dagger. Then the ground below exploded in a thunderous crack. Laozi sprang up like a cannon shot, rocketing toward Nathan's branch. Nathan had no mind for a head-on clash. He sheathed his dagger in a smooth motion, then sprang away, vaulting to a neighboring tree just as Laozi's blow smashed the branch he'd occupied. But Laozi pressed on without hesitation. Poised for the next strike, he chased Nathan through the treetops, the battle far from over. Before his feet even touched the ground, the stranger shot out an arm and aimed it squarely at Nathan. In the blink of an eye, dark red chakra coalesced into massive, clawed hands that lashed out and seized him from across the battlefield. Nathan's eyes narrowed. He snapped his fingers into a flurry of seals and called upon his signature ninjutsu, Fire Release, Dragon Fire Technique. A towering fire dragon roared into being, its molten scales rippling through the air as it barreled straight toward the tailed beast claws. The moment they collided, the world shook. Boom! The shockwave ripped through the clearing, and the dragon burst apart into a torrential downpour of embers that rained everywhere. Yet even as the flames fell, the tailed beast's spectral claws, still crackling with dark chakra, remained unstoppable, their massive forms phasing closer to Nathan once more. He landed nimbly on the scorched earth and took a steadying breath. That clash had cost him surprisingly little chakra. He'd tailored the dragon fire technique precisely to counter the beast's condensed energy. But even so, his attack had shattered the moment their powers met. This wasn't about how much chakra he wielded, it was about the raw quality of the tailed beast's power. And in that, its chakra was leagues above his own. Nathan's chakra reserves were already stretched to their limit. Attribute mismatches and skill suppression forced him to expend far more chakra to counter attacks of equal power, a glaring disadvantage. The only way to bridge this gap, he realized, was through Age Mode. The senjutsu chakra it granted could even withstand yin-yang release techniques and was among the most potent forms of chakra. But that was a project for another day. Right now, he had to survive Laozi's onslaught. Laozi's signature move, the tailed beast claw, hurtled straight at him, its sheer force enough to rip stone apart. Nathan didn't hesitate. He vanished in a fraction of a second, reappearing behind a massive tree. Bang! The tailed beast claw slammed into the trunk, carving out deep gouges and sending splinters flying. Fire Release, Phoenix Immortal Fire Technique, Nathan roared, channeling his chakra into a fierce bluish-white blaze. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of concentrated fireballs shot from his mouth, streaking toward Laozi like a celestial meteor shower. Cute, Laozi sneered, his eyes narrowing. Even as the fireballs bore down on him, he didn't flinch. With a cold snort, he raised his hand and prepared to unleash another tailed beast claw, intending to scatter the incoming inferno before it could reach him. The battlefield crackled with tension. Neither side showed signs of relenting. Nathan's chest heaved as he readied himself for the next exchange, every fiber of his being focused on one goal, outlasting the overwhelming power arrayed against him. Nathan's fireball roared toward Laozi, only to burst open and disgorge half a dozen red-hot shuriken, each one speeding straight for the older shinobi's face. What? Laozi snapped, lunging sideways at the last second. The blades cut through the air with a metallic hiss. One seared against his cheek, the searing heat carving a blackened scar into his skin. As pain flared, molten flesh hissed and smoked. Blood welled up, and Laozi's expression twisted into a furious snarl. "You're looking for death, boy," he bellowed. In a blur of motion, he wove hand seals and drew in a deep breath. His chest expanded as if filled with magma itself. Then he exhaled a cascade of earthen ruin, his signature ninjutsu, Molten River Rock. Glowing lava spheres erupted from his palms like cannonballs, hurtling straight at Nathan. Nathan felt the wave of heat before he saw it. There was no way to block something that combined molten rock with a brutal kinetic force. Instinct took over. He vanished in a silent blink, rematerializing behind the first lava orb just before it smashed into the spot he'd occupied. He teleported again and again, each jump threading him through the sizzling artillery. Seizing the opening, Nathan hurtled into the ring of Iwagakure Shinobi encircling the battlefield, using their very presence as a shield against Lao Zi's next onslaught. Tomohisa Nagashima's shout cut through the chaos. "Everyone, attack him! Don't let him get close." A relentless volley of kunai and shurikens streaked toward Nathan, some of them rigged with explosive tags hurled by quick-thinking rock ninjin. Instantly, the Megatama in Nathan's eyes began to spin, awakening his Sharingan. In that heightened vision, each blade slowed to a crawl, harmless in its drift, except for the blasting seals hidden among them. Boom, boom, boom. One detonation followed another, yet Nathan moved with uncanny precision. He stepped beyond each explosion's blast radius, then twisted away from every flying steel. From the Rocknin ranks came panicked cries. "Watch out! He's coming! Fall back!" Before they could regroup, Nathan surged forward into their midst. With a single, fluid motion, he drew his short sword and cut down 2 shinobi in the blink of an eye. Their sudden collapse threw the others into disarray. Seizing the opening, Nathan formed hand seals in rapid succession. Flames roared to life around his palms as he unleashed his ninjutsu, fire style, phoenix fire technique, its blistering wave aimed squarely at Lao Zi. This time, Lao Zi refused to be careless. He'd made every possible preparation, but Nathan hadn't even bothered to parry his shuriken. Realizing he'd been outmaneuvered, Lao Zi's anger erupted in actual smoke billowing from his body. No exaggeration. It looked as if he were smoldering from the inside. With a fierce cry, he wove his hands into intricate seals and activated lava chakra mode. Instantly, molten rock surged up around him, forming a thick, glowing armor of liquid fire. Heat waves rippled off his frame, and Nathan caught the acrid tang of fresh magma on the breeze. "Ha!" Lao Zi bellowed, hurling himself forward like a living volcanic missile. Chapter 239, Entanglement. Thud, thud, thud. Heavy footsteps pounded through the forest. With every impact, molten rock scorched the earth, turning the soil beneath into smoldering craters and setting nearby foliage ablaze. Standing amid the flames was Lao Zi, clad in armor of living magma, an awe-inspiring, terrifying figure who seemed to embody fire itself. Nathan crouched at the forest's edge, his dagger sheathed at his side. He felt the heat radiating from Lao Zi's armor and frowned. Direct confrontation was suicide. Instead, he activated the instant body technique, his form shimmering for a heartbeat before he vanished, reappearing in the center of the enemy ranks. "Out of my way!" Lao Zi's roar split the air as he charged. At his approach, the rock ninjas, as loyal to Nagashima Tomohisa as they were sturdy, scattered like startled rabbits. They skittered sideways, unwilling to confront the fiery juggernaut. But Nathan had a plan. Draw Lao Zi into the dispersed ninja formation and trap him. Before Lao Zi could overtake him, Nathan pivoted on one heel and sprinted toward the nearest cluster of rock ninjas. He weaved between them with inhuman speed, drawing their attention like a magnet. Nagashima's sharp eyes followed Nathan's maneuver in an instant. "Seal him off!" Nagashima barked. The rock ninjas dropped into formation, hands weaving complex seals as they chanted the beginnings of a powerful ninjutsu. Stones along the forest floor trembled and rose, swirling into jagged barriers that sprang up to block Nathan's advance. Nathan clenched his fists, eyes narrowing. The firefight had begun in earnest, but this was exactly the tangle he'd wanted. Now it was time to see if he could turn Lao Zi's raw power against him. Nathan charged forward, only to be met by a sudden eruption of earth jutsu, jagged stone spikes thrust up from the ground, aiming straight for his vital points. It looked like a trap with no escape, but Nathan had anticipated danger. With his Sharingan activated, the entire sequence played out before him in slow motion. He twisted aside, letting each jagged pillar shoot past harmlessly. Not only did he evade the spikes, he ducked under thrown shuriken and sidestepped wire traps hurled by the Iwagakure Shinobi. In that chaotic hail of earth and steel, Nathan's Sharingan granted him perfect clarity. Then, in an instant, he struck, blinking into the enemy ranks and scattering them before they even knew what hit them. At the edge of the fray, Elder Laozi bristled, fingers twitching toward his blade. He yearned to leap in and protect Nathan, but when he saw the Rock Village ninjas standing nearby, he forced himself to stand down. Nathan was a Jinchuriki, and fear and prejudice still ran deep in the village. If Laozi attacked his own people to save him, the outcry would be merciless. He swallowed hard, reminding himself that sometimes the sharpest weapon of all was a single careless word. Nathan watched his opponent falter. If he drove him to the point of public humiliation, no matter how ironclad his spirit, he couldn't bear the disgrace, especially knowing that the Hidden Stone Village had the power to bring him to heel. Just Onoki's presence alone was a threat. If Nathan pushed things too far and provoked the villagers into demanding Onoki's intervention, the fallout would be catastrophic. Sensing his hesitation, Nathan's lips curved into a faint, confident smile. Exactly as he'd anticipated, those Stone Village shinobi circling the battlefield were shackling his foe's full strength. All he had to do now was buy time until Minato Namikaze arrived. Minutes ticked by. Each Earth ninja spread themselves thinner, forcing Nathan's adversary to weave from one patch of ground to the next. With every maneuver, the gap in his defense widened. Nathan felt hope rise in his chest. Then, bang! A scorching magma sphere hurtled toward him. Nathan darted aside, narrowly evading a cascade of molten fists, and called upon the one technique in his arsenal capable of piercing Laozi's molten armor. Wind style, wind blade. With a matte, sharp exhalation, a razor-thin torrent of wind chakra shot forward, hissing like a blade through the scorched air. In their brief clash moments ago, Nathan had caught Laozi off guard, scoring a shallow cut across the hardened lava shell. Now, he hoped to delay the juggernaut long enough to turn the tide. Laozi's booming roar echoed across the blasted landscape as he poured chakra into his armor, thickening the molten crust around him. The wind blade met the armor with a grinding screech, earth and slag spalling outward, yet the reinforced lava held firm. When the gust finally dissipated, the colossal figure exhaled in relief and pressed the attack once more. But speed was Nathan's only advantage. The heavier Laozi became beneath layers of molten defense, the more sluggish his movement. He could neither vanish nor outpace the wind blade, so he endured each slicing gale, retreating in measured bounds. Nathan wove and weaved, striking again and again, each technique designed not to fell his foe outright, but to buy precious seconds. Minutes stretched into a breathless standoff, the air crackling with chakra. Sparks of rock and embers danced around them as the two warriors circled, tension mounting like a drawn bow. Then, without warning, Laozi surged forward in a final, thunderous charge, his reply to Nathan's relentless wind assault, and the battlefield trembled under the sheer force of their collision. Nathan stood alone. No rock ninjas had come to his aid, and across from him loomed Laozi, unrestrained and brimming with chakra. In an instant, Laozi unleashed a series of massive lava release techniques. Rivers of molten rock burst from the earth, the air trembled with heat, flames curled across the ground, and walls of magma rose like living barriers, turning the battlefield into a fiery purgatory and squeezing Nathan's every avenue of escape. Only his Sharingan gave him a fighting chance. With each blink, he read Laozi's movements, narrowly sidestepping streams of lava and walls of fire. Without those crimson eyes, he would have been overwhelmed long ago. Yet even now, Nathan knew it would be absurd to claim his opponent could kill him. There were shinobi far more dangerous in the world. But this particular foe had managed to pin him in place. Lava release was exacting on his system. The molten armor that protected Laozi also stifled the illusions of Nathan's Sharingan, blurring the boundaries between reality and genjutsu. If not for these limitations, Nathan suspected he could press the attack. But as it stood, he'd been forced onto the defensive. A thought crystallized in his mind. It was time to develop a third chakra nature. Which one, though? Nathan's eyes narrowed as he weighed his options. The answer would decide the next stage of this battle, and perhaps the course of his entire shinobi career. Nathan had originally intended to cultivate lightning release, honing his body with techniques like lightning escape, but now he decided to shift his focus to water release chakra. Facing opponents of Laozi's caliber in the future would be far more manageable if he mastered water techniques. Besides, Water-release jutsu are prized for their range and versatility. Given enough chakra, he could unleash them at the outset to shape the battlefield to his advantage. With that in mind, Nathan steadied himself and resumed his duel with Lao Zi. His Sharingan granted him uncanny perception, and his lithe movements made him impossible to catch off guard. Yet despite Nathan's relentless strikes, Lao Zi remained unshaken, and every counterattack he launched failed to faze Nathan. The two were locked in a perfect stalemate. As seconds stretched into minutes, Nathan's impatience flared. Then voices rose among the outer Iwagakure guards. A lone figure stepped onto the training grounds, his yellow hair immediately recognizable. Minato Namikaze surveyed the battered earth, the scorched rocks, and the whirl of residual chakra before turning to Nathan with a wry smile. "Sorry I'm late," Minato called out. "The situation up north is worsening." "I'll head there first," Nathan declared, already striding toward the village gates. In truth, he'd seen this coming for some time. Not long ago, a savage surge of chakra, the unmistakable signature of the Five Tails, had rippled through the northern air. And with Minato Namikaze noticeably absent, Nathan's suspicions only grew. That was why he'd held his ground here until now. Had he known the threat would intensify, he might have fled at once. After all, he wasn't about to stay and be blamed for someone else's failures. Instead, he chose to meet the danger head-on, knowing that was the only way to keep the villagers safe. Chapter 240, Watching the Battle. Back again? Lao Zi ground his teeth when Minato Namikaze appeared out of nowhere. Minato didn't dignify his taunt with a response. Instead, he turned to Nathan and said, "I've got this covered. You should go rest." Nathan nodded curtly and activated the body flicker technique, vanishing to the edge of the battlefield. Minato watched him go, eyebrows raised in mild surprise. Then he shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "You're really looking for trouble, aren't you?" Lao Zi seized the moment of distraction, roaring as he lunged at Minato. But Minato's reflexes were lightning fast, faster than even Aimi with her 3 Tomoe Sharingan activated. He stepped aside effortlessly, letting Lao Zi's fist slice through empty air, then pivoted and bounded back out of reach. Across the scorched field, rivers of molten lava flowed around craters and shattered rock. Thrumming with suppressed power, Lao Zi scoured the terrain for an opening. With a sudden, fierce glint in his eye, he raised his right hand to his mouth and bit down on his thumb. Blood welled at the wound, dripping into the dust at his feet as he prepared the next blow. Minato's expression sharpened. The real fight was about to begin. Nathan didn't hesitate. He quickly pressed his fingers into the 5 seals, Hai, Shu, Yu, Shen, Wei, then pricked his palm and let a drop of blood fall onto the summoning scroll. As the chakra mist spiraled away, a gargantuan red-skinned toad bristling with warts materialized before him. The toad clenched an enormous smoking pipe between his jaws, wore a simple blue vest over a white sash, and had a short tanto strapped to his side. Nathan knew the moment he saw him. Gamabunta, one of the legendary great toads of Mount Myoboku. Gamabunta surveyed his surroundings for barely a heartbeat before he sprang to his feet. Every wrinkle of his face twisted in indignation. "Good grief, I'm burning up here. Where in the world am I?" he bellowed, hopping to avoid the scorching ground. His eyes then widened in alarm. All around them, the earth was cracked and seared by rivers of molten lava, flames licking the air with an almost sentient fury. Gamabunta's distaste for seawater was legendary, but fire? Fire was something he loathed 10 times more. Without a moment's hesitation, he slammed his massive palms together and formed a hand seal. With a thunderous roar, torrents of water plummeted from the sky like a waterfall, instantly dousing the flames and cooling the molten streams in a billow of steam. As the hissing mist cleared, Nathan stood ready, heart racing, beside the great toad, now clutching his pipe with one webbed hand and eyeing the newly formed pool of water with triumphant relief. When the torrents of water met the roaring flames, they hissed and billowed into a dense cloud of steam that swallowed the battlefield in white fog. For a moment, visibility dropped to nearly zero, until a thunderous impact split the mist. Gamabunta had arrived. The colossal toad crouched onto the ground with a shockwave that scattered the vapor. He tapped his long-stemmed pipe against a stone, drew in a deep drag, then exhaled a perfect smoke ring before fixing a steely gaze on Namikaze Minato. Minato raised his hand in greeting, but Gamabunta's croak cut through the silence. "Kid, don't tell me you forgot I despise fire," he grumbled. "You dragged me into a blazing battlefield. What were you thinking?" Before Minato could answer, Gamabunta jabbed a finger at Lao Zi, frowning. "And as for that troublemaker over there, I've no desire to tangle with him." Clearly, the boss toad had sensed something unusual about Lao Zi. Had he truly wanted to bow out, he could easily have lifted the psychic seal and teleported back to Mount Myobu. Minato knew not to push his luck. He bowed respectfully and replied, "You're right, Boss Toad. This one's my fault. The thing is, I can't handle an enemy like this alone. You've got to step in." Gamabunta only snorted in response, shifting his massive gaze onto Lao Zi. Even though Lao Zi was well prepared, the sheer size of the giant toad made him flinch. But there was no turning back now. Steeling himself, he planted his feet firmly against the ground and launched forward like a human cannonball, using his own body as a weapon against the towering amphibian. "You pest! Stay away from me!" Gamabunta bellowed, drawing in a colossal breath. He exhaled in a violent rush of wind powerful enough to rival Nathan's wind release. Great breakthrough, a technique that normally required 1,000 chakra points to execute. Lao Zi barreled into the gale and was momentarily driven back, but he didn't falter. Feet skidding, he whipped up to his knees, formed a complex hand seal, and called upon his ninjutsu. Melting release! Burning river rocks! With that, scorching hot pebbles and shards erupted from the earth around Gamabunta, hissing and flowing like molten lava as they surged toward the great toad. The battlefield crackled with heat and fury as Lao Zi dared to challenge his massive opponent once more. Nathan focused his chakra, and in an instant 7 or 8 molten spheres coalesced before him. With a flick of his wrist, he steered them straight toward Gamabunta's open maw, the largest toad's one weak point. But the giant toad was no novice. He leapt back midair, avoiding the attack entirely. As Gamabunta soared upward, he began forming hand seals, preparing to counterstrike with a powerful jutsu. At that moment, Namikaze Minato seemed to understand what was coming. In a blur, he activated the Flying Thunder God technique and vanished to the battlefield's edge. Left alone, Nathan barely registered Minato's retreat before a colossal ball of water descended from the sky. It slammed into the ground beside him with breathtaking force. This wasn't an ordinary water projectile, but Gamabunta's own water release, Teppanyama, imbued with potent chakra. Startled, Nathan rolled sideways at the last second, the shockwave rattling his bones as he narrowly evaded the strike. No sooner had he regained his footing than a second water sphere smacked into the earth, sending up a plume of steam and spray. Then a third, a fourth. Each impact tested his reflexes and resolve. Within the blink of an eye, Gamabunta had unleashed 7 or 8 of those chakra-rich water orbs in rapid succession, that as though he were playfully taunting his opponent, rather than engaging in all-out combat. Nathan braced himself, knowing the next exchange would demand every ounce of his skill. The enemy had just unleashed 7 or 8 molten orbs, and now he was pelting them with an equal volley of water spheres. Gamabunta ducked and weaved through every shot, but Lao Zi wasn't so fortunate. Though he managed to dodge the first 4 blasts, the remaining water balls struck him squarely. Boom, boom. The concussive ripples of each impact shook the ground like cannon fire. This was truly a ninjutsu worthy of the name Teppo Jade. The spheres might have looked soft and fluid, but at the moment of contact, they slammed into the earth with terrifying force. Even standing safe at the edge of the battlefield, Nathan could feel the tremors under his feet. Yet despite the sheer power of the attack, Lao Zi did not fall. Through the billowing smoke and rising dust, a solitary figure staggered to his feet. His once gleaming lava armor lay shattered, replaced by a swirling mantle of dark crimson chakra. From him radiated an oppressive aura so intense that every warrior nearby felt their chest tighten, as if an invisible weight pressed down on them. Silence fell across the battlefield. The air grew heavy. And standing there, Lao Zi, reborn in that ominous red glow, made it clear that this fight was far from over. Nathan's eyes widened as a towering, red-furred gorilla loomed up from the swirling chakra smoke, its head thrown back in a deafening roar. He didn't need to think twice. This was the true form of the four tails, Sun Wukong. An inhuman bellow ripped from the beast's throat, and behind it, a single tail, shaped from raw, crackling chakra, materialized. The instant that first tail solidified, a second shot into being, humming with unstable power. Nathan felt his heart pound in his chest. If the transformation continued unchecked, the creature would soon unleash all four of its dreaded tails.